Hackney. For anybody watching, my name's Hackney. For anybody watching, my name's Councillor Sinead Patrick, and I'm the chair of the commission tonight. Thank you to Tracy Anderson, who's the committee clerk assistant tonight. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No.
Okay. I need to tell people that this meeting is being recorded and is being shown on YouTube live. Urgent items. I haven't received any urgent items, or the order of business is set out. Members may have received an email from Tracy with some additional papers just before the meeting started, just for information. Okay, they're related to the paper that we're going to take, item 5, lift maintenance, and also item 6 on the digital divide. Right, do we have any declarations of interest?
Chair, I'm a leaseholder of Hackney Council.
Thank you, Councillor Mahan. Councillor Lynch, are you?
Yeah, I'm a leaseholder as well.
Yeah, same for me. I need to declare I'm a council leaseholder as well. Okay. Any other declarations? Okay, tonight we've got an update, which I hope will be our final update, but we'll wait and see what Thames Water have to say and what Clr Potter Councillor Potter reports to us on the flooding in Brownswood. This is the third time that we've had Thames Water back. We've been following up on the item to make sure that Thames Water carry out all the things they say they were going to carry out, and also that residents are satisfied and back safely in their homes. So I'm going to ask Councillor Potter, who is the ward councillor, just to say something for a moment. Councillor Potter, you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, Chair, thanks. I don't think I'll need that length of time. I'd also like to thank Thames Water for attending tonight. It's very helpful to residents to get these updates. We're now 17 months after the flood on Queen's Drive, and it's still having a huge impact in the area. My understanding is that most of the 83 households that had to leave their homes are now back home, but I understand there are still some residents not back home yet, 17 months later, and there are also still some significant works for some other residents who are still in their homes with works to be done, and also there's quite a bit of snagging issues in process. There's still a strong feeling of frustration felt by many residents with reports of poor and little communication and poor aftercare. There is some damp returning, I have received reports of, across a range of tenures, and the difficulty with some residents in terms of fighting to prove that it's resulted from the flood just raises those battles that residents were having a year ago. Some gardens are still a mess. Some of the work is substandard, with replacement kitchens and bathrooms having to be replaced again. Some of the compensation payments are also still outstanding, and also the payments that are agreed, the actual process to get those payments is quite slow. So residents are still having to invest a huge amount of their own time in navigating their way through. Some feedback I've had from residents this week is that they feel they feel quite remote from Thames Water themselves. They're obviously dealing with loss adjusters and contractors still, and nothing, because they're feeling frustrated with some of the process. They would like somebody to speak to in Thames Water. I mean, obviously I could raise more casework queries, but it'd be quite good if you could give a clear point of contact for residents to bypass the loss adjusters, etc., and go straight somebody in Thames Water. I think that would be quite helpful. And finally, I just wanted to mention the overall impact and emotional toil that it's had on all of the residents, with residents describing some residents in basements still. Each time there's a mini flood, of which there's been 3 in the area recently as a result of the works to replace some of the pipe work going on currently. They kind of are very fearful. I got off the phone to, and another example of some of the emotional toil, I got off the phone to the son of an elderly resident today who described that his mother had to go in a care home. Obviously, I'm not going to disclose details while the works are being carried out. She is still in that care home. And because of COVID, they haven't been able to be with, the resident for all of this time. Only just now, this week, from the 8th of March, because of the change in regs, now this son is actually now able to go and see his mum because he is the nominated carer. So I just wanted to finish on that note, and I do thank.
Thank you very much, Councillor Potter. Next, we're going to ask Thames Water to speak. I don't know who's speaking from Thames Water, since we haven't had any papers from you. Is there somebody here from Thames Water? Or yeah, Mike?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, there is, Councillor Patrick. It's Steve Spencer. I don't know if
Spencer.
Yeah, so I don't know if some of you may, hopefully a familiar face to a number of you, I hope. I came to the lap previous.
Yes. We remember you, Steve.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And I guess I just want to start, look, I promised at the time.
Sorry, Steve, can I interrupt you before you speak? Welcome to the Commission. I'd like you, to respond to Councillor Potter's points, and perhaps you can make sure that you cover an update on residents' return to their properties, which is some of the things that Councillor Potter has raised, customer complaints, and information about how you've improved the processes and communication with residents who are not supported by the council or a house association. And I'd be very interested to hear on those points, because it sounds like from Councillor Potter there's still some work to be done on those points.
Yeah, okay, yeah, of course, I'll do that, Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter and yourself, Councillor Patrick.
So I all give me paid.
Yeah, so I guess I was saying, hopefully I'm a familiar face to a number of you. I promised at the time that I wouldn't personally walk away from this. I would stick with this and stick with mostly after the impact of this, the actual event itself, but also making sure that we make the necessary investment, the risk of this ever happening again. So what I propose is that I will give a little update on the aspect of the work still outstanding and the recovery work that's still ongoing for residents, and then give you a little update on what we're doing, because obviously we'll have a presence in the area, as you may well have noticed, for quite some time, as we undertake a very significant scheme in the area to like I said, prevent this happening. And clearly, at one point I'll just touch on is I'm very conscious of the emotional impact, particularly of the recent events that we've had. One where we've had a burst, we had I'm sure maybe you saw the fountain of water that came up through a valve on the main very recently, for example, and that was one where we were actually undertaking some survey work on the main. We're doing some proactive work on the main to survey it and to check for any problems. And unfortunately, the people who operated couldn't close a 4-inch valve at the time, which caused that fountain, which is considering the location and considering the history is incredibly unfortunate for everybody. And obviously, I can imagine it was very concerning. But it was a part of a programme to make sure we survey those mains every 2 weeks to make sure we can preempt any future issues before we undertake the replacement programme. So I do understand the concerns, and hence I'll come on to and give you a little update on the project that we are currently investing in to make sure that we can give residents the reassurance that the impact that flood had, we will be replacing all those pipes to make sure that doesn't happen again. In terms of the returns, Councillor Potter is absolutely right. There are still a small number of people that are not yet back in their properties. We have, one of the things we spoke about was the support. We've reached out since the last scrutiny panel to because a number of the properties that are outstanding were residents that understandably decided that they would like to go through their own insurance rather than using Thames, and I fully appreciate and understand why people would want to do that. We've reached out to those residents and the insurance companies, both to get an update and to still offer our support. We have, for those properties, there's 12. We still are providing alternative accommodation for 3 of those residents, and the offer remains open that if they need any support, even though they're going through their own insurers or organising the works themselves, then we are here and we will absolutely support them and help them in whatever way we can. To date, like I say, we've got 3 families that we're supporting with accommodation. Others have not taken up that offer, but I would just ask, again, for Clr Potter, if there are people who are struggling in that situation, then our teams still remain in place and can support. Again, you mentioned the situation with the claims. We've had overall individually 292 individual claims. There are 188 properties impacted to some degree. We've had 292 claims from individuals. We have in effect settled or agreed at the moment all but 19. But when I call for the 19 of the ones that we have agreed, Clr Potter's right. There is areas where we've agreed to do some additional work, but yet that's to be completed. So we've agreed the scope of work. It's yet to be completed. Some of that is also looking to align with and fit with customers. So, for example, we've got a number where we've got to do some garden work, but we've agreed that in that situation, clearly we've had a very wet winter. I think records are starting to show now one of the wettest on record. And through that winter, clearly doing work in gardens is not something is appropriate. It will cause more damage. So as soon as the wet weather eases in the spring, we'll be going in to do a number of jobs in gardens as well. So there are a number of things that we've still got to do. So again, Clr Potter's absolutely right. We very much keep a list of that. I have a complete list and a spreadsheet that I personally keep a track of with the team to make sure I understand everything that's outstanding and everything that we need to do. And if then things get escalated, I need to step in, then I do so. I know with Clr Potter, I've had a number of individual emails between ourselves where I will step in and help wherever I can. I think the one thing I will pick up on, which I think is important, is that, and it's disappointing to hear, is that we do still have a dedicated Thames Water team. So even though people are talking to loss adjusters, there is still the team that contacted customers at the very first day since the burst. They still all are there. They're part of my team. They're still all there. And clearly that, even after the last scrutiny panel, when I asked and we promised to reach out, that the fact they're going through loss adjusters and that's still a frustration for people, then I will reinforce and make sure that we make proactive contact with each of those of the customers. Anybody who's got any remaining work or anybody we know we've got any queries, I will commit and make sure that team reach out to each of them individually and make sure that we make contact from a Thames perspective, and actually make sure that any support they need through the loss adjusters, that we'll make sure that happens. I apologise. I thought we'd done. I was understanding we were doing that, and I apologise to all the residents and particularly Clr Potter, who I know gets quite a number of queries that should have been happening, and I will make sure that does happen. And I will keep Clr Potter, quite happy to keep Clr Potter informed of progress and give regular updates on that particular point. I guess one of the things I wanted to do, because I know with time that we've got, I guess one thing was to move on to why you see a lot of us in the area. We took the decision after the burst because we understand absolutely the emotional impact this has had on people living in basements. What you will see is in the little plan in the top middle there, what you will see is that, kind of if you orientate yourself, in the bottom left-hand corner, that's Young Park, just off Seven Sisters Road, and then it comes up to, in effect, Blackstock Road, crosses across Finsbury Park Road, cuts across what was an old historic pipe track, and then the mains run up to Greens Lane. We have 3 large mains in effect that route, and what we are currently doing and what we've agreed is that there is a project for we're going to spend just over £11 million, and each of those mains will be either replaced or will be realigned. And the picture below is some of the pipes that we've laid out on Seven Sisters Road that will, as that project has started. It will take some time. There will be some disruption in the area while we do that. But in essence, then, those large mains that carry the large volumes of water, which mean there is a risk of flooding, when we've completed that work, all of those old mains will either be, in effect, we'll have a new pipe, either a new one inserted inside or a new one laid, which should reduce, clearly for us, that will mitigate and reduce the risk of this ever happening again. And like I say, that's a project that has started. We've got it in 2 phases. Phase 1 is on Seven Sisters Road and up into Finsbury Park Road. That's May this year, and then we'll start on the second phase, which will go towards, that'll start in the summer, and that will go through the rest of the year and into early 2022. One of our largest, in terms of water mains, individually, it's our largest water main project that we're going to undertake over the next 5 years. And obviously we'll have to keep everybody informed and customers informed as we go through that project. As you imagine, it's one of our largest engineering mains projects. So I know last time there was a comment around our general customer service, which Ofwat raised the point, but I guess there, Councillor Patrick, that's okay, because I'm very much about the aftermath, etc., and the project. I didn't know if there's any particular questions that we wanted to pick up. I'm very happy as well, depending on how you want to move forward. I was going to say that I'm very happy, Councillor Potter, if you want to have a regular meeting between ourselves, maybe on a monthly basis to deal with any cases that come up through yourself. More than happy to do that as well, whichever works best for you.
Councillor Potter, how do you see the best way forward?
I would very much welcome a monthly meeting to make sure that all these ends are tied up and I can specifically address, and also residents know I'm having this monthly meeting so they can make sure they get any queries to me. I appreciate your offer of proactive contact, but I don't just want that to be for outstanding queries. Obviously, they are the most important. I think feedback I've also had from people that have moved back in where maybe there are snagging issues is that there's been no contacting maybe 2 or 3 months later just to see that things are still okay. And I would hope and expect that Thames Water, your cells would actually provide that aftercare, really. I mean, I know you described the Thames Water team that's always been in place, but from the feedback I've got, that's obviously not evident to residents on the ground. I know very much you did newsletters right at the start. I think that tailed off in 2020, and I think there was very little of that general communication. So it'd be really good to get an update that goes to all of those residents so they know how many collectively have moved back in their homes, they know what's still outstanding, and they know what commitments that you've still got to residents that are impacted. So that is my ask.
Okay, I'm happy to do all those things. We will produce a newsletter, and I will get my team to contact everybody, all 292 that had a claim. Then we will proactively contact everybody. Yeah, I'll make that commitment and make sure that if people still have something outstanding, we're aware, and if they're happy, then great. If not, then obviously, but we'll make that and do that aftercare, and we'll definitely produce the newsletter and give everybody an update, both in terms of the work that we're doing, what's outstanding, and also we'll make sure we have a newsletter for the project as well. Because like I say, we'll have a presence in the area for at least a good 12 months.
Yeah. I know you have communicated in terms of to the general residents in the area about the works that are ongoing, but I think there needs to be more specific communication to those residents directly impacted, and it's been a bit lacking in the last year.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we will do that.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Steve. It is disheartening to hear that there's still problems 17 months on, and that I'm not sure whether they would have, that some of the things that you're promising would have happened if we hadn't have asked you to come here again. I mean, it seems that every time we have Thames Water here, things do move on for the better with residents, but it does seem a shame that we have to keep having you. But I hope this is the last time, but maybe we'll see in the next municipal year. I'll keep in touch with Clr Potter and see whether we need you, whether residents still think there's an issue. I'm sure there's residents actually watching this on YouTube. I just wonder whether any member of the commission wants to come in and ask a question. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask or a comment? Councillor Rathbone. I couldn't see your hand because yeah.
Yeah, no, I know it's difficult, isn't it, Chair? Thank you very much, Chair. Just a suggestion, really, to Steve. But maybe you could communicate with residents through Hackney Life or Hackney Today. You know, our newspaper, which goes through all the doors. And I just wondered, have you kind of got any plans for actually talking to residents directly in some way, with meetings or in any other way? I know you've got, I think you've got their email addresses, but just to keep them informed in whatever way.
Yeah, so no, thank you for that suggestion. We will take a look at that. I think at the moment it's always been, I think, as we all know, the last 12 months it's been quite difficult with many of the restrictions in terms of, because clearly we would have had some more regular meetings in face to face. I think what I would propose, just thinking, welcome your feedback, is that we would, what I can do is I can really very much quickly kick off making sure we do some outbound calls. So it wouldn't just be via an email. I'd get one of my team to personally call each of the residents. And clearly then if a meeting with an individual resident is appropriate, or that's what they would like, then that's something that we can organise. Clearly large groups at the moment is not really, is obviously something that we have to be careful. But I think if we will, rather than an email, if we try and make contact via phone and then have personal meetings if need be, then we will do that. And like I say, I think what I would suggest is, yeah, I would very much welcome the chance to have the monthly meeting. We'll go through individual cases with Clr Potter, and then if we feel that progress isn't being made, then by all means, please do invite me back.
Did you have any more in this presentation, Steve? I thought you'd finished.
The only thing you did, you asked me to come back and talk about our customer service, because Ofwat had previously said that our customer service was poor, and I just wanted to give people a little bit of background to that comment, if that would help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please, and then I'll take Clr Potter back.
Yeah. Okay. So if we can, Tracy, sorry, if we can go back one slide, just to, if that's possible. In essence, the Ofwat's comment was absolutely right. There would be no point me trying to defend or trying to explain anything other than and apologising that our customer service is not where it needs to be. We absolutely recognise that. We've made a few changes recently. So we've got a new customer service director that has just started. And a lot of our issues that we've got around customer service, unfortunately, is to do with a new billing platform that we've put in place. So when we look at customer service, we look at all aspects. We look at provision of clean water, the drainage service, and billing. About 70%, over 2/3 of our issues and complaints and customer dissatisfaction drives from billing. What that relates to is the fact that we, firstly, in effect, we put in a new billing software platform, a new billing system, would you believe, in February, March last year. And one of the challenges that posed for us is at the same time, we sent everybody to work from home because of COVID. And therefore, the familiarisation and how people got used to that platform, we had to do a lot of online training, a lot of improvement, etc. Those two things compounded with a significant increase in the amount of complaints and contacts received around our billing. And that's something that we've been working hard over the last year to try and put right, and actually brought a number of our people back into the office in a COVID secure way to try and improve that. And we are now on an improving trajectory, but we know we've got a long way to go before we get anywhere near the kind of high performing companies in the sector. And we have to hold our hands up to that and say that, for all those that are impacted, we apologise. That is a significant piece of work and improvement plan that we have put in place and we need to deliver on. But it's going to take us some time to get where we want to be. In terms of the other aspects, our key complaints really come in twofold. In my part of the business, which is operations, the primary reasons for the complaints I get in my part of the business is one, leakage. So leaks, the leaks that you see off our water mains. We've been doing some work with our regulator Ofwat and the GLA, and between us all, we've managed to secure an additionally 275 million to replace water mains in London over the next 4 years, which is great news. That's additional investment to what we originally envisaged as part of what we call the determination with the regulator. But in effect, that will start later this year, and we will be targeting the areas which are prone to bursts and prone to leakage, which we think will start to make a difference. It's only the start. We would love to have that programme between now and, well, until I retire at least and beyond. We've got an extensive programme that we want to really get stuck into within London. That's the first step. It's a really positive step, and will start to make a difference for those areas with people that suffer with either burst, interruptions or leaks. And on the second front, for me, on the waste side, which I mentioned, is that on the waste part of it, drainage part of the business, our primary issue there has been around the flooding that we've had this year, and particularly, obviously, with the very wet weather that many of you know we've had. And that has been a challenge for us as well. That's primarily in the Thames Valley part of our region. So out in the suburbs, out in the Thames Valley, where you've got the River Thames, the basin of the River Thames, and a lot of chalk streams, has been where we've had that flooding. But primarily, the key message I'd like to give you is that, firstly, I can't do anything other than apologise. And the reason that we've got clear plans that we've got in place to make an improvement. It will take us a little while, but I just want to reassure people we are absolutely committed to being and doing a lot better for our customers than what we have been. And just some on the next slide, which people will see, some of the things that we've put in place very recently to support customers through the pandemic. We've done a few things like we've got a new bill now, a new bill design. We've upgraded our website. Following Queen's Drive, made a lot of changes to our incident response. But more importantly, a few things that we've pulled out is that we've actually submitted a significant donation to people, what we call our Customer Assistance Fund. And we've also got a trust fund as well, which is just over £1 million. And that's to help people who are struggling, not just with their water bill, but generally struggling. We can support customers. And we have been trying to identify as many customers as possible that are eligible for our social tariff, which takes 50% off their bills. We've also done some work with the Citizens Advice Bureau to help with debt advice, and they're the biggest funder of debt advice as well in the region. So we recognise where we've come from. We recognise what we've got to do. We're a long way from where we want to be, but we're trying to put in place now some of the things, hopefully, that show people that we are trying to make a difference and we are trying to improve, and hopefully people will start to see more and more of that over the coming years. So that just gives you a little bit of a potted history of the things that we're doing around why we are where we are and why we recognise where we are with customer service.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to hear that Thames Water are listening. I'm just interested, I'll bring Councillor Potter in a minute, the thing that you've taken the slide down now about the money that's available to help people with debt advice and the social tariff. As councillors, I don't know if other councillors know about it, but it's the first I've heard about it as a councillor, or certainly share this commission. And it'd be really good to get some more information about that and how we can link our constituents in. We know that since the pandemic and even before, there's a real problem of poverty and destitution amongst a lot of our residents. We had a meeting last night about food poverty, where we heard about this, another scrutiny panel, and it'd be really good, considering that all the disruption that we've had in Hackney over the last few years from Thames Water, whether some of that money, especially for debt advice and water bill relief, could be put Hackney's way. We could certainly use any money that we could get for advice work, and obviously debt the bill relief obviously has to meet criteria, but if you're looking for people to meet that criteria, I'm sure us as ward councillors could ensure that that information is out there, and we can pass it on to the voluntary sector, who do a lot of work providing food for people who can't provide food for themselves, either because of poverty or they're shielding, or they just can't get to the shops at the moment for whatever reason. So certainly we can make sure that you certainly get customers for your 50% off, and it'd be really good to talk to Thames Water about perhaps putting some money into Hackney for debt for advice work. That would be really good payback that Thames Water could do, considering, I mean, I know it didn't affect our Kings Park residents where I live, where I'm a councillor, but half the marshes, well, a large chunk of the marshes is dug up in Woodland for the flood that for the first waterway, and that's still all dug up. Because I walk there every weekend and it's all still dug up, and I don't know what's happening about that. It'd be good if you could, perhaps someone could write to me as well councillor, and also to the WIC councillors about that. But it'd be good if you could get back to me on that, on some money for Hackney, on the debt relief. And I really hope that we don't have to have Thames Water here again with another flood in the next municipal year. I know you know, I'm glad you're committed to keep coming, but it's very nice to see you. But I hope the next time, if we have to see you, it's because everybody in Brownswood is back in their home, everybody's got their compensation, and everybody is happy. I am worried to hear from Clr Potter though about people in basements still having a one-off flood, and their worries about floods. And I do think perhaps there is some work that Thames Water need to do, particularly around basements, because I remember the floods in Upper Street in Islington a couple of years ago where people nearly died. They just got out with seconds to spare. So you do have to think about basements. I mean, you know, houses can be repaired, may take time and stress, but people can't be replaced. And, you know, fortunately, nobody's been injured or died, had serious injury or died through a flood, as far as I'm aware, but it could happen. So you do need to be careful. Clr Potter, did you want to round up?
I'd just like to know, given what you know now, Steve, in terms of the work that still needs to be done, what's your most realistic guess when, as Councillor Patrick said, everybody's back home and all compensation payments have been dealt with, and all work complete?
Yeah. So I'd have to say about the people going back into properties, it would be difficult for me to give you an accurate, difficult for you to give you an answer to that one, really, because all of the people that we manage directly and liaise with directly ourselves are back in their properties. It's the people who are dealing through their own insurers. We've reached out to see if we can support, and we've asked for some information, but at the moment there's no obligation for people to share that with us at all. So we've been informed that the vast majority are close to returning. You know, we would welcome the ability to have that information and support where we can, but clearly that's down to the individuals whether they want to share that with us. In terms of the work, there's a variety of bits, and I've got a whole list, and I don't want to pick particular examples, but for example, there's some work we want to do in gardens, and we've agreed that we'll do that once obviously we get into a little bit more of the spring and the ground's not so saturated. So garden work we would expect to be done over the next maybe to April and May, any external work, because clearly then you're not damaging the kind of the soil structure in the garden in the long run. We've got the team. The team are very much keep me abreast of all the outstanding issues, and like I say, the kind of claims that we've got 19 that we're still in some discussion with. Some have come to us at a slightly, in effect, they're a second claim in essence. It would be difficult, but for me, I'm like, I guess, all of you, you know, I want to be able to come here next time, or if I do need to come next time and say, look, we've resolved all these issues now and they're all complete and we're done and dusted. I guess some of those are still protracted, some of those discussions. If I'm honest, there's a few that we're very close to resolving now. I think what I can do is maybe difficult for me to get an exact time because there's a number. What I would suggest is that what I'll do is I can very much, if we agree to meet up, I'll run through the ones that we've got and an expected date for each of those as to when we think we'll get them resolved.
Okay. That sounds a good step forward. And just the last thing, is it possible to share the slide? Because I know you didn't have papers as part of the agenda pack, so the slides are available.
Yes, they are passed through. They are. Yeah. Now, you raised a number of points. Do you want me to come back on those, or would you rather move on?
If you can come back quickly, I'll give you a minute.
Yeah, so two points. One thing, firstly, the debt advice we fund through the Citizens Advice Bureau. So we provide assistance. This is about to help with debt advice. So please do use that service. On the social tariffs, please do, and anybody who's listening to the call, if you are in any way, or any of your constituents are in any way struggling, then please do contact us, because our contact centre agents will help and support and put people onto that social tariff. We will send some information through to the Commission, and show you can share that with your obviously with people in your constituencies. But the one thing I'd just like to say is that if you do know anybody, please do ask them to ring through. Our agents are trained, and they will put them on if they're eligible, we'll put them on, switch them onto the social tariff, which is an immediate 50% off their bills. And that's open to everybody, wherever they are in Thames. That's open to everybody, and we'll support. And like I say, anything you can do to that would be great. But we'll send the information through so you can share it with everybody.
Okay, thank you. Could you let me know whether Hackney CAB gets any money from Thames Water?
Let me find out who it goes to within Citizens Advice. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
I don't expect you to have that information to hand, but it'd be very useful to know. And if not, who we contact to lobby. I know Citizens Advice, our Citizens Advice, are overwhelmed with people needing their help. So any extra funding they can get would be extremely useful. Okay, thank you very much, Steve, for attending, and we hope that when you come next time, it will be to say that everybody is back and everybody is happy. And the Commission will liaise with Clr Potter to see when will be the best time. I hope it will be the autumn of this year. Will be a good time. Hopefully, we think that it'll be 2 years that everything should have been completed by then. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
I'm going to move on to the next item.
Oh, no leave.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to
I'll
the next
disappear.
item.
Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you for coming. Okay, the next item is item 5, which is the item on lifts. Sorry, I've lost my place. Sorry about this. It's nice on lift and lift maintenance. At the moment, I'm going to. I know that we've got Councillor Mackenzie and David Padfield in attendance. We're going to be discussing the London Borough of Hackney's lift protocol, the lift maintenance contract, which is out to tender. It's about to go out to tender at the moment. So we won't be discussing the details of that, because that's obviously a document that's out to tender, and it's commercially confidential. We're also going to be discussing contract monitoring for when the new contract is in place, and how we want to see council officers monitor the contract and the arrangements, and how also I've been taking questions from members and comments from members about how they think that monitoring should be improved, and some of the incidences that have happened in the past with the previous contractor or the council, and how things haven't been working. And this is to ensure that that when the new contract is in place, and if the council takes over the work in dealing with letting our residents know that a better system is put in place. I see that Councillor Peters has just joined the meeting. Councillor Peters has joined the meeting because it's an issue that he asked me to. He asked the Commission for it to be put on the agenda. So I've invited him into the meeting for this item. I'd like to ask Councillor Mackenzie, who's the Cabinet Member for Housing, if he'd like to come in, address the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Patrick.
Sorry, Councillor Rathbone. Sorry, Councillor. Was that a declaration of interest or something?
No. I say that I think you might have missed out that Sinead Burke is here, Head of Property and Management.
Thank you. I hadn't missed it. I was going to ask it. Never mind. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sinead. I've also got other officers in. Thank you, Sinead Burke's here, the Head of.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
Yes.
Mackenzie.
Thank you for inviting us along to talk about lifts. We of course understand the absolute importance of having a good service for lifts in our medium to high rise buildings. They're the most critical component in terms of ensuring people have a decent quality of life. I'm going to hand you straight over to Sinead Burke and to David Padfield, who's going to update you with the developments and activities we've been taking over the course of the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, so I think, Councillor, actually we'll start with the lift protocol stuff and then we'll move on to Sinead's stuff around the contract. So Gilbert, is it you or James that's going to introduce the lift protocol work?
It's me. Hi, everyone. I'm James. I'm the head of housing management, and as you probably all aware, there is a lift protocol in place. The protocol is there to ensure that lifts are fixed in a timely manner and that residents are kept up to date with repairs and likely timescales. There's a great emphasis on vulnerable residents. So as you know, some of our blocks, we all have residents to a greater or lesser degree with vulnerability. And my guys, my housing officers, part of that protocol is to make contact with those residents, assess needs, and then put things in place to help them. Now, before the coronavirus epidemic, that sort of support was kind of fragmented. And one of the sort of outcomes of the coronavirus is actually it's sort of focused all our help and support into one place. So now my officers are making calls, assessing that vulnerability and directing people to the Here to Help, or what was the coronavirus helpline, because actually we've got practical solutions for people, deliveries of food and medicine and things like that. What we really want to do though is to try and embed a better way of communicating to all residents. So we're making these residents calls to vulnerable residents, but everyone else also needs updates. And I think that's where Sinead will pick up on the new contract. We want to take ownership of that as council employees. The protocol at the moment puts the emphasis on the contractor, and actually what we really want is that contractor spending time fixing that the lift, not contacting our residents. They're our residents. We want to take responsibility for that. So we need ways of obviously that information flowing between the contractor and ourselves to update residents. We've been experimenting for quite a long time using text and email services. So sending information to residents via text and email. We're now kind of working on those who don't have those ability to what can we practically offer. These things can change quite a lot. So sending letters isn't really feasible, certainly not now with the lack of offices. And also they take a lot of resource to print and post and obviously cost money. So that's our kind of next bit to help residents who don't have access to mobile and email. So is it questions now, or are we moving on to the?
Do you want me to go?
Sorry, can we have?
I think it's useful if we went through kind of like all the officers to update, and then you'll have a meaningful discussion.
Fine. Okay. So will I take over from here on this? Sorry, I wasn't sure if how we were doing the report. So, the next stages of the report just indicate some of the outline proposals that we have for the lift maintenance contract that we are beginning to tender. So this is a longer term contract. As Councillor Patrick indicated at the start, this is kind of early work, and we are still going through the council's formal approval stages. So this is kind of an indication of what we are planning. It's subject to formal approval. The current service provider, ELA, has served a termination notice, and that will be effective as of June 2021. We are currently tendering for the interim contract, and those details are ones that are quite difficult to discuss right now. As Councillor Patrick mentioned, those are the ones that are very live and ongoing at present. But we are looking to put in place a one-year interim contract for servicing and maintenance from June. And the reason it's a one-year interim contract is our long-term procurement takes quite a long time to go through by the time we talk about going to CPC approvals and our leaseholder consultation, which both of those have to be done either side of then a two-stage tender evaluation process. So you couldn't do that all in the 6-month termination period. So we'll have this one-year contract in place. It will only cover servicing and repairs. It will not cover capital works, and that's just due to the limited capacity that we have to consult with the leaseholders on these kind of interim contracts. So where the works values are very high, we can't do the necessary consultation with leaseholders. The outline ideas then that we have for the long-term contract, which I think of more interest really to the group, are that in contrast to the current situation where we have one service provider who is responsible for both reactive and planned work, so both the servicing, the repairs, which is the reactive side, and the long-term capital work, which is all our lift replacement, we have one provider doing all of that in the whole borough. And clearly it's put ourselves in the position where now when we have a termination arrangement, we have quite some risk to the council. So what we are proposing is to try to mitigate that risk by putting in place a framework contract instead. Now, framework contracts have some slight disadvantages over the term contract that we have at the moment, and that would be that when you issue a single contract, you can issue it for up to 10 years. A framework contract is limited at 4 years, but we've reviewed it and we feel that that is a trade-off where the balance is in favour of having a framework. So we're looking at 3 to 5 contractors. We think we have the value of work to attract contractors to the framework at that level. We have about 600 lifts. There's quite a lot of work there. We're still looking at the ideas of how to award contracts. We have to take into consideration the fairly serious health and safety implications, obviously, of working on lifts. They're quite a dangerous environment, and so you sort of do need to give contractors their patch so that they have control over the access to that lift. But what we're looking at is having one contractor who perhaps has a patch, maybe the north of the borough, for example, a second contractor who's servicing repair in, say, the south of the borough, and another one acting as a backup should one of the two fail. So whilst contractors would be given an area, perhaps we would have some recourse to a backup. I've also noted in the report that we are finalising our documentation to go out to tender on 4 other mechanical and electrical contracts, and there's quite a good deal of procurement work that we can cascade from that research over to these contracts. We've done a lot of work with legal firms on the forms of contract, for example, researching the types of specifications that you can use in these contracts. And I think, as James began to mention, we've also begun a review of the wider lift service offering. We've been including James in those conversations to ensure that when we're redesigning and thinking about the responsibilities, we're only really starting this work now, but when we start to think about the responsibilities that we place on the contractor in that new contract, we think about what we want them to do. And as James has said, we would like them to focus on fixing the lifts, and we would like to be more in control of the resident communications. Obviously, everybody knows about our cyber attack, and that complicates things at present enormously, because a lot of the systems that we would previously have relied on to perhaps do text alerts, which it does exist, is just not really available at the moment. But we think once those systems are back online, we can trial them and see is it just a more live form of just updates and interaction with the residents on the issue. I've indicated an outline programme there for this contract, so there's quite a lot of stages that we have to go through yet, but we are hoping that we can be in a position to have a contract start for June 2022. And then once in contract, I have some notes on the contract monitoring. So the contract monitoring is done by a dedicated team. So we have dedicated staff, services manager and a clerk of works who manage the lift service. They're both specialists in lifts. And in recent weeks, we have been, well, because we lost a lot of our figures, so we've been redeveloping our performance dashboards on lifts, focusing them away from, say, contractor KPIs a little bit. I mean, we still look at that, but actually really just understanding the lifts themselves and really trying to get to the core of what the technical issues are with our lifts to try and inform some of our later work. So we are looking at things like the number of times the London Fire Brigade attended trappings, overall lift availability, and the number of lifts which have been out of service for 24 hours. So some of those are contributed to by the contractor performance, but we're trying to have a more focused understanding of the lifts as a service to residents rather than just looking at the performance of the lift contractor. So it's quite basic at the moment. It's been an Excel spreadsheet due to our cyber attack, but I think it's been useful at least to start to interrogate those figures, especially when we lost everything some months ago. Lift availability usually runs about 97, 98%. And I should note it'll never run at 100% because when you take it out of service, you know, you lose some of the percentage. So you'll never run it quite at 100% or anything like that. So 97, 98%, it's what, you know, I mean, you'd like to see it at 98, but anyway, it has dipped recently to sort of 95, 96, and that is connected to the reduction in the servicing regime during COVID. So obviously the lift contractor had a lot of staff isolating, and we have seen that, you know, we have seen the point of why we have a servicing regime, I suppose, is that we have had some accumulation of issues which have led to just a higher rate of breakdowns to where you see just as a lower level of lift availability. We are also then working on a few other improvements. So we are moving to reporting software for clerk of works inspections to help with monitoring. We are also working with our colleagues in resident safety at the moment to ensure that a wider range of compliance information on lifts is on our Alchemist, our compliance database system. And we've also done a review of, it's kind of a funny thing, but we've done a complete review now of which blocks have which type of two lift situations, or if at all, because one of the things that is difficult for James and his team is when a lift goes down, do residents have access to a second lift? How urgent is the assistance that we may need to offer somebody? And obviously the lifts have a whole variety of different situations. Some of them, it's straight up, there are two lifts in the lobby. Sometimes we have ones where they go to alternate floors, and some people find that fine. If one lift goes down, they can just manage a flight of stairs. For other people, that's completely impossible. Some lifts have a situation where the other lift is down a walkway, might need to be opened up, etc. So we've now reviewed and we have that understanding of exactly what all the situations are, and that will help us now to work with James to target that assistance just a little bit more carefully to make sure that when the lifts which really affect people go down, we can offer that assistance in a more targeted way. And so that's really what we have proposed on the lift contract monitoring. They're quite early ideas at present, obviously, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sinead. One of the things I'd like to pick up is on the response. I gather it was the contractor's response to let people know, or was it the council's responsibility to let people know that when lists were broken and how long they'd be out of action for?
Our current contract asks the contractor to place a notice on the lift on every floor saying, you know, we understand this lift is out, we raised a repair, and we think it will be back in action by a certain date. And the difficulty that we have is that if the contractor doesn't do that very well, we then have a lot of complaints generated, and we've spoken to James about perhaps can we take greater ownership of that? Have we got better ways of doing it than putting posters on every floor, perhaps a text-based system? Because obviously I think immediately you can see why sticking posters on every floor is a system that's vulnerable to not being done particularly well. And so we're trying to see if we can do that for the new contract, but at present the responsibility to post those is with the contractor. And the other challenge is those dates do change, because they might look at a lift, see that there's a problem, think, oh, we can put it back into action by then, take the part out, try to repair it, and then they find they can't repair it, they have to order a new one and the date goes back, etc. So where the date changes then and then the poster doesn't change, it's just very frustrating for people. So we'd like to have a more real-time, quicker way that we can communicate with residents, ideally using that text thing that we have or notionally have, but need to restore.
Yeah, I mean, I think the council ought to take it back and do it, as well as, I mean, I think putting posters on lists is one thing, but definitely we ought to be texting, but we ought to make sure that people who haven't got access to texts are alerted as well. But one of the things that concerns me is the support that there has been, and I hope it's going to improve. But I think this is down to the council in the sense that the support to people who live in the blocks when the lifts aren't working. It's very well saying the lift's going to be repaired in 3 days, 5 days, or whatever. But there's surely an issue, and it's how we deal with this both now and going forward, where people's lives are affected by the lift not working. We know that many people who live who rely on the lift, either to get in and out of their houses. People are often trapped in their houses because they can't get out because the lift is broken, and also can't get back in. I've been and had a look at the information that it says by the list, and the information, the telephone number just talks about breakdowns. Please ring this number if there's a breakdown. It doesn't say please ring this number if you're trapped in your home and you can't get out to go to the hospital, go get shopping, whatever. And it doesn't say please ring this number if you're at the bottom of the lift and you can't walk up the stairs to get back into your home. So I really think, as well as letting people know that a lift is broken, that we need to come up with a protocol for dealing with the broken lifts and residents' concerns about how they're going to access their homes, either get out of them or get back into them if they are trapped at the bottom, or not trapped, if they're at the bottom, as well as how we deal with people actually trapped in the lift. I really think it's important that this protocol is dealt with as a matter of urgency, so that residents, are not locked either in their homes. I know through COVID, the switchboard and mutual aid has been working, and they're here to help. And it'd be good if perhaps that could be developed in a way that covers lift protocols. But people need to know who to contact, when to contact people, and what help is available. People, can people get help with shopping if they can't get out of their houses? What happens if they actually do need to get out of their house for a medical appointment and there's no lift? It's good to hear that you talk about opening up walkways so that people can get access to other lifts. Is it possible? I know that some lifts, as you said, only do alternate floors. Is there a way of rerouting a lift that only goes up to alternate floors to cover all floors? No, okay.
There would be concrete where there should be a door.
Right, okay. Well, that's not for you, but I suggest that when we build new properties, I'll take that up elsewhere. I don't know if we do that in new properties, but perhaps it's something we need to look at when we're doing new properties to make sure that all lifts cover all floors. But I'll let members of the commission come in. I've got Councillor Peters, who I've invited to the meeting. I've got Councillor Rout and Councillor Lynch. I'll take the three of them, and then I'll ask officers to come back. And I'll take four. I've got Steve Webber. Sorry, Steve. From the Residents Engagement Group, who've been invited to this meeting to take part as we're talking about things that affect residents, and then we'll come back for another round. So, Councillor Peters.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me, Chair. I had approached the Chair and asked that this item be included as a discussion point for this scrutiny commission, and that was largely because whenever I go to my local TRA meetings, there is often a complaint about the time that lifts are out, and last summer there was one very tall block of 18 stories that had one lift that had been out for some time, and then the second one failed, and I had to bother Councillor Mackenzie to ask people someone to go out and fix that. And then there was another block in which a lift was out, and a resident in a wheelchair couldn't leave his home and hadn't been contacted by the council. I think it's important that we have this discussion. My particular questions are, I guess, on the vulnerable resident list, how do people get onto that list, and how do we identify those people? And has there been a loss of data through the cyber attack? Is that perhaps the reason why the resident that I spoke about there hadn't been contacted? And then just, I think probably for Sinead, it's excellent to hear that we're actually thinking, well, we're expanding the number of contractors that we have, and that we're also thinking about the technology or the technical aspects of these lifts. A recurring theme in lifts being out of order for some time tends to be a lack of parts. Do we have, are there a set number of types of lift with standard parts, and do we store them, or can we store them anywhere in Hackney in order to make sure that we don't have to order them in from Italy or China or wherever? And just very finally, sorry, Chair, I know that I'm asking quite a few questions. Do we even need to contract out? Could you explain to me why we can't just have a core of mechanical engineers employed directly by Hackney through the direct labour organisation?
Yeah, the vulnerable resident, there's no vulnerable resident list we have at the moment is from basically the coronavirus response. So it's made up of anyone through a COVID lens, admittedly, but anyone with a level of vulnerability, which is a very large net, but in a way it captures everyone that we could possibly think is vulnerable. So a lot of our calls are, I'm fine, it's annoying, but I'm okay, I don't need support. So it's also made up of the personal evacuation policy, which is every tower block has to have anyone identified as will struggle to get out of a building in event of a fire. And we're also using that information as well. So that is actually collected annually through the resident safety team. So we use that. Yes, it has been affected by our cyber attack because our list we're using is from now March last year. So it is a static document and is updated as and when officers find vulnerability. What we're developing at the moment, though, our new system will allow us much greater access to information, not only that housing holds, but also other parts of the council. So adult social care, mental health services, anything the council holds that we can have access to, that we're allowed access to, this will inform our future identification of vulnerable residents. So it will be a dynamic live system. It will also allow us to automatically text these residents for this lift that's gone out, because we will have a proper structure of our buildings. As Sinead has said, it is difficult if you don't know the block. Well, does that lift service every floor? But because the data will be structured in a way, it will allow us to automatically text the right people or email the right people, the right information. So the future is very bright for that. At the moment, it is that static document, but it is a document that was very, very wide in its remit. It was from lots of data sources, NHS, adult social care. So actually, it is quite encompassing. Any new residents that come in have a initial tenancy visit, so we can update that as we interview new people that move in. So yes, cyber attack's been a pain, but actually we were kind of pretty good anyway, and it wasn't affected by the hack directly. Yes. this service will only get better because we're developing a system in mind to help officers get to the right information they need to make the right decisions for the right people.
Good.
So then on parts, first of all, we do have a parts store, but there is not a very concisely limited range of parts which we need. And really some of them are incredibly expensive. And so speculatively holding it in stock in case that one part breaks is just not really possible. A lot of them do come in Germany rather than Italy, but there you go. They come in from there. Sweden, I hear as well, they're big into lift parts, but there is certain manufacturers in the UK as well. But what tends to happen is, I'm not an M&E engineer, but my best analogy is that they're a bit like cars. Lift. So maybe have a piece of furniture or something building, you can get a different building part to fit into it. But if you've got a Volvo car and I don't know, car part, like, you know what I mean? But a part of your car goes, I'm not an M&E engineer. Anyway, you need the Volvo part. You can't just get one from Citroen. Doesn't really work. And even you have to get the Volvo part from, the time, they might have upgraded it or something and it doesn't fit anymore. The new Volvo doesn't go with the old, all this kind of stuff. And so unfortunately it's that kind of situation. I think even some cases they need to be bespoke made so that they sit, particularly the parts which are the motor, so that they sit with the various other parts of the lift. I don't know, we're all learning stuff about tachometers lately and encoders and all sorts of stuff, but it has to be the right encoder sitting with the right tachometer and the right motor and stuff like that. So we have tried that and it works to a small extent, but then it doesn't. And then and unfortunately that is an industry-wide issue, is that some parts have just an incredibly long lead-in time. It's not something that is unique to us or the contractor indeed that we're working with. In terms of insourcing, obviously that report that we are bringing to Cabinet Procurement Committee will outline the option for insourcing in line with our commitment to do that. But we have suggested that we don't. And the reasons are there's quite a big staffing need that you would have to have in place with a full out of hours service. It's very specialist. It's very hard for us to even recruit the specialist team that we have in property and asset management to run the contract. So to hire, I think we needed about 15 operatives to work on our lifts is incredibly challenging. There are a huge range of insurance working at risk issues that come up. So just in terms of managing your risk and health and safety and stuff like that, there's a whole range of issues there with staff working on essentially dangerous machinery in dangerous places. It is all moving parts and stuff. And then the third real issue is what we've just touched on, which is that the council would then need to have in place very complex supply chains to get all these parts. You couldn't just necessarily go to have one lift part supplier available. You would need to have a whole range of companies that you could draw on to make sure that you were able to access the particular lift part that you were going to have. And so that supply chain, having that in place is actually kind of key to it. And we also then know, I've spoken to my colleague Steve about this, there are ambitions to grow the DLO, and those ambitions are focused on expanding a certain level of services that we've already identified as being more viable to expand into. And it just seems like that's the best place to concentrate his team's efforts. But actually, what I will say as well is there is a member drop-in next week, and Councillor, you're welcome to come and learn more about that. And then we'll obviously have the CPC meeting where that decision will be referred to a formal meeting. Again, it will be, in this kind of forum on the 12th of April. And so obviously that is just my response now, but it's a report which is undergoing final drafting and approval, and it is still subject to that decision.
Would working with neighbouring boroughs create the scale that would start to make that sort of insourcing viable?
It's not. To be honest with you, I don't know the answer. But I don't necessarily think that scale is a barrier. It's more about having the supply chains in place, having the risks in place, etc. I mean, it probably helps on scale a little bit to have operatives that you could move around the place, you'd cover for leave in a more effective manner. But scale itself is not really the barrier. We've quite a lot of lifts as it is.
You're on mute, Councillor Patrick.
I'm going to call the next group of members, and perhaps officers could wait till all members have asked their questions to reply. After we've done this item, we will have before we move on to the digital divide, I will take a 5-minute break, a comfort break. But so I've got Councillor Rao, Councillor Lynch, and Steve Webber. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Patrick. Couple of things really. I can see the attraction of having different companies responsible for different parts of the borough, just because then the kind of communications between the housing officers and the TRAs and what have you is all much more straightforward. And you've already explained that certain companies will get used to working with certain lifts, which is good. But I suppose my question is about how many lifts break at any one time and what the priority would be, and whether we're getting any kind of priority built into the contract. So for instance, if you've got a company that's dealing with South Hackney, I don't suppose it's that unusual to have half a dozen lifts all break on the same day in South Hackney. So are we going to be building something into the contract which tells the contractor how we want to prioritise how they tackle those things? Or are these companies sufficiently big that they can just promise to tackle them all on the same day? You know, I can see that if they do promise that, I'd be a bit disinclined to believe from my experience of these things. And so I just wonder if we should perhaps be thinking about some sort of prioritising, whether it be this, you know, the number of floors in the building, or whether there is an alternative lift available, or whatever it might be. And part of the reason I mention this is also because I think intermittent problems with lifts is a significant issue. I've got one particular resident on the Frampton Park estate who tells me that she hasn't been out of her 4th floor flat, she's elderly, for 4 months, because the lift has so many intermittent problems that she doesn't believe it when it's been fixed. So she's just frightened that she's going to get stuck if she does go out. And you know, the issue with intermittent lifts is that contractors start to think, oh my God, it's that one again. Well, we'll do that one last because they're used to that one being broken. So I just think something along those lines would be good. And the other thing I suppose that's concerning me a bit is that there are some lifts which have regular intermittent problems, which do then end up hopefully on a replacement list so that they're going to be replaced. But it seems that at the moment, because of this contractual change, the replacement programme is on hold. I'm guessing it's on hold until at least June 2022 and probably later, because I assume that you're probably going to have to contract again for who's going to do your replacement services. So it may well be 2023 before we're actually looking at the replacement programme starting again. And that seems to me a very long delay.
Okay. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. It was just a very quick question. Sinead, you've presented before to scrutiny, and I have to say I'm incredibly impressed. And what comes across from what you've talked about is just my concern is that the termination of the contract by the contractor has prompted this review of how we're basically doing contract management in the council and how we're holding people to account who we pay to do works to our buildings. So I think it's great what you've put ahead of us in terms of the KPIs, and it links into what Councillor Rout's just said. There needs to be some sort of like quite focused operational on this in terms of like, absolutely, you know, if something's not repaired within 24 hours, what are you doing about that then? When's the next review of that? What's the next stage? It's no different to any organisation where you have some sort of like mitigation in place when you hit the next level. So incredibly impressed by that, Sinead. And it was just probably from what James was saying, I was at another meeting around the Here to Help service, which is incredibly exciting, and I think we should be supportive of it. And I think it is absolutely, hopefully, going to provide some sort of wraparound service to our residents, so that we create a bit more of a one-stop shop for our residents as well, so that when we have contact with them, we've not exactly got a dashboard on every resident, but we've certainly got those insignificant red flags there potentially for us to sort of link in. And I think that I feel is the vision for us as a council, is that we start to link in all our different parts of the council, so that if you're ringing up to report a lift, maybe it'll flag up that person's also considered vulnerable and there's other stuff going on. So it's just there. But that was just my comments really. So yeah, just welcomed the new brave world, and thank you, Sinead. Appreciate your comments have been extremely reassuring. But I just have a niggling feeling that I really hope that this isn't just unique to lifts, and that we're doing this approach for all of our managements of contract, particularly within our buildings. So thank you.
Thank you. Steve Webber from the Resident Liaison Group.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Patrick Held, the other co-chair, has a question to ask as well. Could he come in after I've asked my question?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'll get officers to come back, and then I'll take him in the next round.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. A question about, are there plans to involve residents in the procurement of the contract, and also residents to be involved in the maintenance, the monitoring of the contract as well?
Okay. My question was, what arrangements will be in place in the event of schedule-led maintenance of the lifts, other than posters or sending text messages to residents? Because the fact that we had a cyber attack, it might be difficult. And also, what arrangements are in place if the lift breaks for the elderly or disabled residents that are on the higher floors?
Perhaps I could ask officers to come back and answer those questions.
Okay. James, I think most of these are sort of technical ones. So perhaps if I do the technical ones and I leave I think Helda's last question was really on the lift protocol. So the first question I had was, would different lifts have different priorities? It's an interesting question. I think it's something we'll look at and consider. Generally, we have an expectation that all lifts are attended to, at least for diagnostic, within a certain time. And the priority that is given to lifts is not the height at the moment, but it's what happens. So we have a higher priority where somebody becomes trapped in a lift than where the lift just breaks down. That's our current prioritization: is someone trapped or not? But I think the question you've asked is perfectly valid, and I'll talk to the team about it. The other question that you have is about the intermittent problems, and yes, we do have lifts with these kind of niggly problems that go out for a bit and then back for a bit, etc. And it's really irritating, I can imagine. In terms of the replacement program, yes, you're right. Unfortunately, it is difficult to do any replacement works until the new contract is in place. And when we are in contract, we then need to develop a capital project, do further third round, what we call leasehold consultation. And so that does take time. And so unfortunately, you're right, is likely to be sort of summer 2023 before these new contracts would yield capital works. We will try to see what opportunities we have in the meantime, but that is the reality of a very sort of long procurement world that we live in. Councillor Lynch notes, has determination prompted the review? So yes and no. Yes, obviously, because there are things that we can only really think about again when we're letting a new contract. So there are things where we can say we can throw that out. We sort of had to work with it. But what I will say as well is that some of it has been prompted by the cyber attack, by needing to think how we get figures back again and not being able to collect the old ones, and almost critiquing what we need to have. And some of it as well, I have to give credit, we have quite a new lift team, so that the two specialists that I have joined us recently, and they've actually also brought quite a lot of new energy to the work as well. But generally speaking, yes, a new contract is the time when we can do that kind of bigger thinking, because you can change the contract terms. We are applying it to other contracts. Like I said, we've got 4 M&E contracts, which we'll be hopefully going to procurement with shortly. And we've done quite a lot of review on that. We've completely changed a lot of the approach from what was previously a Morgan Sindall contract. So that's been really changed. We've done a lot of work on KPIs and things like that on that. Steve had asked, are there plans to involve residents in the procurement of the contract? Steve, I think we just need to have a chat about that, because at the moment, like I said, it's up for approval. I've just written the report, but happy to discuss ideas about that. We've got quite a small window of time frame on it, but yeah, happy to see if we can build something into that program. And then I'm sorry, I'll hand over to James, because I think it was one of the questions. Helda's question was really about the lift protocol.
I echo Councillor Lynch's enthusiasm for the Here to Help. It is such a great project, and it has spawned so many other things that I'm working with. The device network that's in place now, it offers so much more advice and support for residents that we can tap into. I've got lots of things lined up. So part of my wider what I want to do is have a better offer for vulnerable residents at all, just in its entirety. Obviously, this will form part of that lift protocol, but the advice and support offered will get better as we rely upon more on the sort of that charitable network, not necessarily just relying upon our statutory bodies, who are going to be overwhelmed probably in the next year or so. So all that's in train, and it's really exciting time. To Helda's point around, you're right, what we're actually asking is those people who need the lift to get out of the building or into the building, what we're talking about is actual muscle on site to literally physically pick someone up. We've had a few instances recently, and I'm sure Councillor Peters will probably talk about the same person. We'll take those cases on a case-by-case basis at the moment. So that offer to that particular resident was, well, we're going to have to find someone, and he had a very supportive family and supportive network, to physically lift people. And people who need to be places have offered hotel accommodation, because they have to go to this person had a vaccination appointment had to get to, and that was because they then need to go to various other medical appointments. So we are flexible to offer something, but from a long-term sustainable, yeah, we're talking physically picking people up, which we don't have a service yet to do that. But as part of that wider advice network, we have, like, for instance, been working with Age UK East London, who have been helping us with some of our people with hoarding, and they do have muscle that they can tap into. So I'm going to try and explore some of that a bit more. Are there agencies out there who can provide this service? Because at the moment, I can't think of any council service that does that. Having said that, people who are in that position will normally have some support, either a social worker or some other specialist person, and the protocol says we will work with them, and we do, to try and offer something to that person. Yeah, being trapped for months on end is not something we want, but on those cases that does happen, and they are few and far between, yeah, we have an ability to offer something else, like hotel accommodation or something like that. But yeah, it is tough. It's really difficult, because we just don't employ muscle people who can lift people who just are around to help us. So I've got great hope in this advice network. It's quite exciting work, and we will be delivering a lot more services through it.
Okay. Can I ask what is going to be put in the contract? I don't know if this is confidential, but what sort of things are you thinking of putting in the new contract to ensure that lifts are repaired properly? As I understand it, previously the contractor never turned out often didn't turn out in time in the contract, or turned out, looked at the lift, went away again, and as Councillor Rout said about many lifts breaking down. We need to ensure that all lifts are fixed properly, and if all lifts can't be fixed properly, what is the priority for fixing lift? I assume that if it's one lift that serves a tower block of 18 floors, then that should get the top priority. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not a council officer or a lift engineer. So we need to make sure that there is a priority, but also that the information, we've talked about the council ringing residents, but as I said, the information actually on the lists themselves is not very helpful, and I'd like to see better information placed on the lifts and outside each of the lifts on each floor about what you should do if the lift is broken and who you should contact, and also what happens out of hours. If a lift breaks down out of hours, is there an out of hours team to come repair the lift? What happens if someone comes back home after 9 to 5 finds the lift is broken down and can't get back into their home? Are these things taken into consideration? What happens? I don't think residents know, and obviously with COVID at the moment, I know we're hopefully coming out of it, but there's a lot of restrictions on what people do, where people can go. We're only meant to be in our homes and out of our homes for exercise or essential things like shopping. It's not like people can go and sit in a cafe and wait for a lift to be repaired. So are these things taken into account when lifts break down, and how do the council deal with it?
I really wanted to get to a point where I don't want residents telling us the lift's broken down. I want to be telling residents that the lift's broken down. We have the technology in place, and at the moment it's not great with the cyber attack and us changing systems, but we should be in a position where we're sending information out in a timely manner to residents, because at the moment, I don't want to text and email residents the lift's broken. Well, they know that. It's the question they really want answers is, when is it going to be ready? The technology's there. It's just, if we get this contract right and get the information flowing to us in a much better way, I want to be taking that control and texting and emailing and contacting residents rather than 50 people calling us about the same thing. I think that's the service I really want to deliver. It is all there. It's just not fortunately possible for us to do it at the moment.
So as James said, we do actually have remote monitoring systems on the lifts at present. And so we do get alerted that the lifts are broken down, and even out of hours, that remote monitoring system will automatically prompt a call out to the contractor. So in fact, I think Councillor Peters mentioned an example recently where the second lift had gone down the block, and I think you mentioned you phoned Councillor Mackenzie that evening, because Councillor Mackenzie phoned me that evening, and I phoned the dashboard of our lift contractor, and they already had the repair because the remote monitoring system had called it through. And so they'd gotten a team out that evening. I think it was rectified the following morning because they needed to just pick up the part from a shop or something like that. But that exists. The difficulty with it is that it's not connected to our resident communication system. And the other difficulty with it is there's a lot of noise, what I would call, on that system. So the lifts generally have a thing where if you kind of annoy them too much, for want of a better word, if you hold the door too much, they will often go into shutdown for 10 minutes just so that that you can't actually break them any further. And that shows as a shutdown on our system. But we don't want to be texting people every time the lift does a little 10-minute shutdown. That would be really irritating. They also obviously are shut down for servicing and stuff like that. So there's a level of noise that we need to eradicate. And for whatever reason as well, they show kind of hundreds of 3-second outages and stuff like that, which is just it moving or correcting itself or whatever. So we need to understand how we can filter out of the system an appropriate level of outage, which is worth alerting residents over and starting those conversations instead of it's back in action before they've even noticed and they're just annoyed that we texted them. At present, we try to make sure that James's team are notified of any lifts which are out since the previous day. So kind of overnight, and then we say, right, well, we need to start this. So that's our current kind of trigger point. Councillor Patrick, I think you asked me, oh yes, sorry, what can we do to make sure that they do actually fix the lifts? I think that's something that we need to work on in detail when we look at the contract provisions, when we get onto that in detail. All I can say initially is the frameworks where you have recourse to more than one contractor do give you slightly more flexibility and do give you slightly more chance to perhaps allow the contractors to compete, rather than in a situation where you are reliant on a single contractor. And so initially, that's why we're proposing the framework, is to just give us that flexibility to manage it. And I accept your point as well about whether some lifts should carry greater priority than others. And like I said to Councillor Wright, I think we'll look into that and we'll see what we can do to ensure that. I mean, obviously there are people on the 3rd floor who say, well, my block isn't tall, but I'm still stuck. But
yeah,
I think we can accept there are probably more people on the 17th floor who find themselves in that position. And so I think there's a valid basis for just even exploring that idea.
Sinead, is there a shortage of lift contractors in the country? Because often in the past, this commission's heard when we've looked at other contracts that there's a shortage of particular contractors for whatever it be that we're looking at. Are you confident that you're going to get enough contractors to come forward to join the framework?
So, I suppose, I mean, at present, I couldn't say that I've done market testing at present.
Right.
You know, I've looked at the value of what we think the contracts will be worth, and we think we can attract the contractors. There are quite a lot of contractors out there. I do know what you mean. I think we've spoken about this. There are 1 or 2 very specialist areas of works where I know we just end up with similar contractors again and again because it's incredibly specialist. Lifts isn't quite that. There are a good range of contractors out there, but we will need to do market testing, I think, as part of our procurement to ensure that we are attracting the right parts of the market.
Because I wouldn't want us. So if we procure new contractors and they don't work out, we're not going to be stuck with them because there's nobody else out there.
Yeah, I don't want to be like that, no.
I mean, because this is such an important part of people's lives.
It really is. Yeah.
I'm concerned, James, you said that you wanted to let residents know the lift was broken, but this process isn't quite ready yet. But my question still is, what's going to happen in the meantime till the system is ready? How are you managing? And also, my still question to this is, what happens if someone is stuck outside their home rather than stuck inside it? You know, I can understand that there's things that you can perhaps put in place if people are stuck inside, apart from the gentleman who perhaps had to be carried down. But what happens if someone's stuck outside? You come home, you live on the 17th floor and the lift's broke and you've got a buggy and a child, or you've got a shopping trolley full of shopping that can't be carried up the stairs, even if you've got the ability to walk up that many stairs. Or you're in a wheelchair or just can't get up the stairs. What are we going to do, and how do people find out about what they should be doing? I do think the information needs to be physically out there on the lifts or on the blocks, so that people do that. Not everybody always has a phone on them. People's phones break or don't take them out. We really do need to think about every situation, and phone. We think everybody has a phone, but lots of people don't necessarily have phones or do texts, and maybe some people might need a call rather than a text. We've got to pay for later on the digital divide, and not everybody, even now, not everybody has a mobile phone. So I do think you need to think about every possibility. When you talk about letters and posting them, I was quite horrified that we actually posted letters. I assumed you went round the blocks and put letters through people's doors like they do on my estate, which is TMO estate. My block doesn't have lifts, but if there's an issue, the TMO send the caretakers come round and deliver letters to people about issues that are instantaneous. So I do think we need to look at how. And I've got one more question, and I know before it was mentioned, there was an article in the Citizen about a block in 335 is it Queensbridge Road, and what happened there, and concerns that residents had concerns, and the lists are out of order. And since it's been referred to in the light of this meeting, I just wondered whether officers had a reply and could update the meeting about what happened in Queensbridge Road, since it's in the Citizen and this meeting is linked to that article.
So we still have the lift protocol as it is right now. So that is the contractor putting up notices. That is, as Sinead said, a report gets emailed to every one of my area housing managers about all the lists that have been out overnight, and that's what starts the protocol at the moment, that everyone on that list will be contacted if they're vulnerable, as I mentioned earlier. So we still have the lift right now. Yes, hand delivery is something that's in the protocol right now. It's just very difficult for us to do at the moment with all the restrictions we have, which is why we've relied upon the posters by the contractor and the text and emailing and the calling of the residents. So that's our kind of response at the moment. For people who are sort of stuck outside or inside, this is, we haven't got a ready-made solution to physically pick people up and move them into places. The residents can contact our service. There's a helpline available. There's not a ready-made solution that we have in society for this, which is why we're exploring everything we possibly can through that advice network and through our statutory bodies. Where, for those cases which you've mentioned already, we can, with time and planning, get someone and arrange for them to physically pick them up and take them out and put them into hotels if that need is required. For that particular resident, they had appointments they had to make. There was no debate whether they could put them off. So that was our offer to them. So we do have the ability to offer, hotels and alternative accommodation. But when it comes to physically picking residents up, I don't know where we can draw upon that. The 355, and I think David's done an awful lot of work on 355. I mean, that has a concierge service, and we've adapted that concierge service to help those residents in 355 Queensbridge. So where there is existing, provision like that, then we can change and utilize that in a different way. So that's kind of our response for picking people shopping up. Again, during COVID, that has kind of been, organised for us. So again, I really want that work we've done during the COVID as our response to carry on, because it's a really good service, not just for us in housing, but for lots of other teams and departments. Certainly for those people who don't meet that sort of safeguarding requirement for adult social care, it's a really good response. But we are going to have to look at, as you say, what can we really offer residents in terms of picking them up and delivering them to their house, to their front door. Very limited.
So I could just come in there just to add a bit on what James was saying about 355 Queensbridge Road. I'm sure that everyone here knows 355 Queensbridge Road is a tower block that's been designated as housing for the over 55s. So we've got quite a few elderly residents in there. It's served by 2 lifts that serve all the floors. But unfortunately, one of those lifts hasn't proved very reliable. It's been out of action for a while, and we're waiting on a part from Germany. So we're very conscious that residents are worried that the other lift will go out at some point. And there was a tragic incident last autumn where a resident very, very sadly died at that block. So what we're doing is we're doing everything possible to sort of make sure that we do look after that extra lift, which is clearly under extra strain at the moment. So what we've done is we've put in place an enhanced servicing regime. But of course, going along and servicing a lift means that lift's out of action for 2 hours whilst it's serviced. So we had that done last week, and what we did is we arranged for letters to be delivered to all of the residents beforehand, telling them that the lift was going to be out of action on that particular morning. And we also, as James alluded to, we put an extra concierge on duty for that entire day, just in case anyone was caught short or had problems with shopping and needed some extra assistance. And for all the time that the other lift is out of action, if we do have to service the lift, we'll continue to do the same thing.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and it's glad to hear that the council has taken that on board and is providing an extra service. I'm going to wind this item up now because we've got two other large items just providing resident engagement still to tackle tonight. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and if we can come back at 2:45, please. Thank you very much, everybody. 1:45. Are we all here? Can we restart the meeting?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to restart the meeting. We've got item 6, which is the digital divide for council housing services. This item will cover housing services supported to residents who are digitally excluded and cognitivity for communal halls, and a presentation covering the council's work on digital cognitive skill support and equipment access. I gather Henry Lewis is going to do this presentation. I don't know whether David Padfield, as the director, is saying anything, or is it Henry?
Well, what I was going to do, Councillor, I was going to give you a quick introduction on some of the issues around digital exclusion that have been raised with us.
Yeah.
And then I'll hand over to Henry, and Henry can talk you through some of the work that we're doing on digital inclusion and specifically the full fibre connectivity project. So I'll just be very brief on digital exclusion. So obviously during the pandemic, a huge amount of the world has moved online, shopping and work, conversations, and there seems to be this assumption that that's what's happened with a lot of council services. So actually, even though we've done some great work online over the last 12 months, a lot of our housing services, in developing the services, we've been very aware that a significant minority of our residents don't have access to the internet, don't have access to digital tools. So in developing those mechanisms of communication, we've been very aware of that. And in the paper, I've just stressed some of those channels that we've been using. So there's a big emphasis on telephony. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that telephony was going to be absolutely crucial. Housing used to run its own contact centres. We merged those with the corporate ones to make sure that the move to remote working for all the telephony staff was consistent across the council. It meant we could move staff around to cover in times of staff shortages. So that started off as a temporary move. It became permanent. There's also been some service enhancements there around voice-activated services, automated callback services, all of which have improved that telephony service. And we've talked earlier on about the outbound calls that were made during the pandemic and how that's led to the Here to Help service, which we talked about a lot on lifts. A lot of communication channels are printed, and again we've mentioned Our Homes tonight, which we put an awful lot of effort into. That gets published quarterly, and James also talked about what we're trying to do with mass texting, because you did say earlier on not all residents have access to a mobile phone, but the vast majority do. So text messages, based on our experiment so far, look like quite a positive area for us to develop. And then what we've tried to do is we've tried to be as joined up as we possibly can with the wider digital inclusion work, which includes things like providing laptops to disadvantaged children, and that's tied in with some of the resident participation work that we've been doing, and Shara's on the agenda later on, and she'll be telling you about that. But that's a very brief overview of what we've done digital exclusion. So what I'll do is now hand you over to Henry, who's got a presentation for you about some of the work on connectivity and digital inclusion.
Could you introduce yourself, Henry, what your title is and what you do, please?
Yes, so good evening, everybody. My name's Henry Lewis. I'm the head of platform in IT, which is really my day job. But in the context of this particular piece of work, I'm the council's strategic lead on connectivity. And I wanted to talk to people today about the work we're doing to launch the Better Broadband programme. So if you bear with me, because I'm going to try and present my screen, which is something somebody in my position should be able to do. So please don't laugh if I fail. So I'm going to have a go now. Here we go. So hopefully you should be able to see my screen now, everybody. If somebody could just shout out to indicate.
Yes,
No.
Okay. Was that one no?
Can you not see it, Steve?
No, I can't. No.
Can see it. I can see it.
Okay, so I'm assuming
I
that
can see it. Yeah.
Oh, good, fab. So I'll take you through this presentation. I'm going to whip through this relatively quickly because I think to leave as much time as possible for questions at the end. So introducing the Better Broadband programme. I'm going to run through some brief context, talk about what the programme is, the benefits we will deliver, and then a little bit about the next steps. So this programme came about 2 or 3 years ago now, where the council, whilst it was doing lots and lots of work in individual departments around connectivity and delivering connectivity, that we lacked an overarching strategy, and I was asked by the mayor if I could provide one. So that culminated in our vision for connectivity in Hackney, which was agreed by Hackney Cabinet in December 2018. And why that's important is that it clearly set out some core principles. And the key principles really were that we're committed to use our assets to deliver and maximise benefits for our communities and the businesses of Hackney, rather than using our assets to try and deliver improved income for the council, which is something that previously we had been trying to do by concessionary arrangements for things like Wi-Fi, and something which a number of other councils were also attempting to do. So one of the most important assets that we have is our buildings and our council buildings, and the Better Broadband programme is focused upon how we can leverage our housing stock and provide much more affordable, high-performing broadband services for tenants, but at the same time also deliver benefits for some of the other key services that we want to target, which I'll come on to in a minute. So why was connectivity important even before the pandemic? I mean, I suspect that everybody knows this, so I'm going to whip through this. It's obviously important in terms of job search, supporting people to get online, to make applications. It's always been an important part of education, supporting children who want to do their homework online. I think that there's been studies which suggest that if you're able to get online and shop online, typically for a household, that can mean the difference between about a saving of in the region of £500 a year for a household. And the other reason it's important is to be able to support a lot of our SMEs, and particularly those SMEs in Hackney which are focused upon digital and media services, where we had a lot of feedback from them that they found the cost of connectivity from traditional broadband providers to be much too expensive for them and a barrier to them setting up successfully in Hackney. So obviously, since the pandemic's arrived, the importance of connectivity, I think, has become even more important to people. People will obviously understand the context in terms of homeschooling. So I've spent the last few weeks at home with my kids trying to do that, and connectivity has been a problem for us, as it is for a number of other people who don't have access to full fibre services. It's been a real lifeline, connectivity, where it's available, particularly for people during the pandemic who've been shielding and haven't been able to get out and to keep in touch with their families and friends. Obviously, very large numbers of people are now working from home. And I think the other thing which we shouldn't forget is that during the pandemic, when so many of our normal ways of entertaining ourselves are denied us, connectivity provides a source of entertainment through the things that we can live stream and stream, etc., etc. So it's important and always was. So it's important because we have manifesto commitments around this area. So there's a key manifesto commitment on connectivity, which is about pushing the market to provide Hackney with fast, consistent internet connectivity. And it's also relevant to some of the manifesto commitments for some other services as well. So, for example, there's a commitment to continue to invest in and develop our temporary accommodation provision in Hackney. And the feedback from many families in temporary accommodation is that the ability to be able to get online and to be able to access connectivity in their own rooms is incredibly important to them. It's not the only thing that they care about, but it's one of the important asks that hopefully this connectivity program will be able to deliver. So we didn't just launch into this program and do a thing. We have talked extensively to our tenants and to businesses actually about this program. And in the autumn of 2019, we surveyed all our tenants, and there is a link on the papers which will take you to a consultation report, which will give you a lot of detail about that. Suffice to say that it was an overwhelmingly positive response to these proposals, and that tenants in particular were very focused upon wanting to have broadband services that worked. Lots and lots of feedback about broadband, which was very intermittent and didn't work well. And this was in the context of a survey that took place before the pandemic. So I suspect these the responses would have been even higher, and they would have focused even more upon the importance of high-performing services post-pandemic. Affordability was also a massive issue for people. People were worried about the cost of broadband services, and even if they could afford to purchase broadband themselves, they were worried about other people who might be less able to. And those sorts of digital inclusion issues were the sorts of things that many people focused upon. So we also talked to the Tenants Liaison Group about 18 months ago, actually, at a point where we were starting to form these ideas, and we've recently been back to them again quite recently to talk to them about the programme now that we're in a position to start thinking about launching it. So what is the programme? Essentially, we're working with a number of full fibre connectivity providers to implement high-performing, more affordable broadband into our housing blocks and our street properties. So we think that we will be able to cover almost all housing blocks and street properties, and that many of our housing blocks in particular, tenants in those blocks will have a choice of full fibre providers over the course of the next 2 to 3 years as this programme is rolled out. This is being done at no cost to the council. In fact, the broadband providers are funding roles in our housing department where there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done to support the rollout of this programme, and they are covering the costs that the council will be incurring to support the management of the programme in that way. And obviously this is something which tenants have a choice about. Nobody has to sign up to this programme. We think that this will give people more choice, and we think it will provide better value for money, and that's something I'll talk about in a little while, but it's entirely voluntary. And I'll also come to talk about the range of social value benefits that we are being able to leverage because of the work that we're doing. And as I say, the programme's going to run for between 2 and 3 years. That doesn't mean that it will take 2 and 3 years to get to everybody. We think that the programme will begin quite soon, and what we hope is that we will get to most areas with at least one provider within the next year or 18 months or so. So we think that what we're delivering is more affordable, and this table tries to explain what we mean when we say that. So what we've done is we've taken an average of the most recent pricing that we've seen from the full fibre providers, and what that tells us is that every price point and at every level of connectivity, the full fibre providers are on average undercutting the more established connectivity providers that we all know about. I think the other thing which is worth mentioning is that when full fibre providers say that they are delivering a basic service between 50 and 150 megabits per second, typically that is what you get. And what we know, what we know about Virgin Media and BT is that often they advertise the fact that they are delivering 50 to 150 megabytes per second, but the actual experience that you get is sometimes very, very well short of that. Whereas with full fibre provision, you genuinely get that level of bandwidth, and that means that you can do all the basic things that you'd expect to be able to do when you want to go online, even if you have a number of people in your family trying to do that all at once. So social value benefits, these are some of the things that we are delivering on top of the fact that tenants will have this improved choice. We are going to be able to deliver full fibre internet in perpetuity for some key council services, so forever in effect. We'll be able to deliver full gigabit connectivity to all our temporary hostels. And what we will do is we will build Wi-Fi on top of that. That's something that the council's IT team will do in most cases, so that everybody in hostels is able to get connectivity in their own rooms for free. Likewise, we are going to do that with housing with care schemes. The housing with care schemes are actually operated from buildings which are owned and managed by registered social landlords, and we are talking to them so that we will provide the connectivity for free, and they will then provide the Wi-Fi so that the service users in the housing with care schemes and the carers in those schemes are able to get online. At the moment, there is virtually no Wi-Fi in any of those schemes. We believe that we will be able to hook up almost all of our housing community halls, or certainly those, and we will be able to hook up the 6 children's centres that we manage. Each provider is in essence going to provide 40 free connections in perpetuity, which we think will mean that we will have 120 in total, which should be more than enough to be able to deliver the services I've just outlined. On top of that, the providers have agreed that for 1 in 10 of every households that are connected, they will provide vouchers to us, which we can then target to households in financial hardship. We think that will mean that there will be at least 1,000 households that we'll be able to target in that way. And what that will mean is we'll be able to probably deliver, I think, a 50% discount on the monthly cost that they would be charged, which means that they would be able to get the basic package, which is still a high-performing package, for somewhere in the region of £10 a month, which we think is affordable. Not affordable by everybody, but certainly something that will help for those families who are able to take that up. We are also going to be delivering digital skills training. We hope to be able to deliver some of that digital skills training through the community halls, and there will be a whole range of apprenticeships and employment opportunities as well. All these providers have signed up to the Better Business Toolkit. They are all London Living Wage payers, and they've all basically signed up to plans with our employment and skills team, which will mean that they will be actively recruiting local people to be and providing local employment for people in Hackney. I should also mention that very recently these providers have also announced the fact that there may be free connections available for 12 months to vulnerable households with school-aged children, and that's something that we're also pursuing as a priority with them. So why is this a good deal for Hackney? So this table outlines the various benefits that we are getting compared to the benefits that a number of other boroughs that have already rolled out this scheme have been able to negotiate. And what you will see is that we probably have a broader set of deliverables than most other boroughs. And that's, I think, because we've negotiated very hard. And you know, we haven't just jumped at this, we've taken our time to talk to these providers and explain what Hackney's about. And we've negotiated hard with them. And to be fair, we've also benefited from the fact that we've been able to learn lessons from what other councils have done. So very quickly then on next steps, we have one provider currently signed up to this scheme, an organisation called Community Fibre. We anticipate that Hyperoptic will sign up in the next 2 weeks, and we believe that G Network will sign up as well in the next 6 weeks or so. We are very close to agreeing the rollout schedules for the programme, which we will then be able to advertise and talk to people about, so they will know approximately when they would be able to anticipate they'd have the ability to get better broadband. And we are already partway through a programme to deliver a comms plan around this programme. We remain in discussion with RSLs because we want all people in social housing to benefit from this scheme, not just people in housing that is managed by Hackney. And this scheme is available to RSLs as well as to Hackney tenants of Hackney Council, and we are talking to RSLs about that, as for that matter other connectivity providers. As I said, we need to do some additional work to agree the criteria, which will help us to target our discount vouchers, and we will be continuing to liaise with our voluntary sector partners about this programme as well. So that's hopefully a relatively quick run through. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and throw it open for questions.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, yeah, Steve, I've got Steve Webber from the Residents Liaison Group to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Henry. Thanks for your presentation. Clearly, you know, the Resident Liaison Group, we've been communicating with you regularly, and we have been very interested in how this scheme is developing. On the issue of families on very low incomes, that's good that you're going to offer the voucher scheme to reduce the monthly costs even further. One suggestion I would put forward in terms of actually bringing in perhaps some more cash to subsidise it even further, is perhaps because I'm aware the council probably hasn't got any more cash to subsidise this any further, is to actually the council to identify some voluntary sector partners and do some crowdfund and get some cash in to subsidise it even further, and perhaps extend the subsidy to the next group, you know, the next group up in terms of the indices of poverty.
Okay. Councillor Lynch, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Henry, for another good presentation. You always bring it was very good when we see Henry's on the agenda with your presentations. So my question is, I'm really, I can see Gilbert's on the call. He knows what I'm going to say about community halls. Now, we've had this discussion before around the viability of our community halls, what's the future for them, and it's probably with my little NHS hat on that I'm thinking about this in terms of where the travel is going in terms of wanting to provide services at place and in people's local communities. And I think, you know, if one thing's come out of COVID is that, you know, it's completely obvious that we need to be doing stuff nearer to where people live. And I think the fact that people wanted to get their vaccine in Hackney and Buckling Street and not travel 20 miles down the road, well, not quite literally 20 miles down the road. So my question is there something being worked on around how the benefits of having this internet access within our community halls will potentially provide some sort of opportunity for us to provide some other non-council services within our community halls, which without doubt probably could provide some sort of an income stream to the council as well. So in effect, we could, you know, the CCG could commission us to provide some sort of stuff in the future when we can meet, obviously. But clearly, I think this is a really welcome thing. I think it's great. And like you say, when I book into anywhere you go, straight away you ask for the Wi-Fi password, and I think this is really good, really good. So that was just my question, really. And the second thing is just to say, I think we should really push for the registered social landlords to be included as well, because I'm always banging on about this as well, and the equity of experience for those people that are in have council tenants and people that are housing association tenants as well. I think it's incredibly important. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Actually, can I ask, on the basis of Councillor Lynch's question, I was going to ask about community halls. I just wonder how it's going to be managed, because we keep hearing, I've heard that buildings need someone to open them, close them, and be there. It's all very well having Wi-Fi and connectivity in the building, but if the building's shut, like most of our community halls are, even before the pandemic, most of the while, or only open at certain times for specific groups. It's not, you know, how are residents going to make use of this? It really needs to be there as an asset for the community. It's no point putting Wi-Fi in for it just to be used for the odd presentation, that perhaps for an odd meeting or something. So we really need to make sure that it is a real community asset. Then I'll see whether anybody else has got any questions.
Let me know when you're ready for me to come in.
Yeah, if you want to reply to that, or whether Gilbert wants to reply.
Yeah, I could start off, and my colleague Shara Cooley can back me up with anything I miss. I do think absolutely, Councillor Lynch, this is a real opportunity for with the fibre optic delivery to community halls is a real opportunity for us to use them as the community halls to join up with our other service partners in order to deliver where we can additional services. I think it's quite an important point because we unfortunately, because of COVID and then the cyber attack, work that we were doing on the future use of our community halls and so on had to be put on hold. And along comes fiber connectivity, which again gives us another attractive options for us to consider. So we won't let the opportunity go to waste. Definitely not. We're going to have to work very closely with our partners, both the voluntary sector as well as our statutory partners, and in looking at what can be delivered, and the opportunities for people to access this new service. The part of the community, the community hall review was actually looking about how we deal with accessibility. That yes, our community halls team manage about half directly, and the other half are managed by our local TRAs and other groups. And again, we were looking to put look at how we put those sorts of arrangements on a better footing, so that we maximise the use of our community halls, and those are going to require some very tough decisions about how they're currently being used, and then proposals for them to be used in the future. So and there is also issues around how much we invest in terms of the investment in our community halls, because some of them are in not a very good state, and they do require us to make some tough decisions about their future. So some of the work that Henry is doing in terms of prioritising the rollout of the fibre will have to take into account some of our information around the state of the community halls, about which ones should be targeted first, so to speak, and which ones that we may have to do other work to before they're in a position to be able to take full advantage. So there is a fair bit of work to be done, but we will want to capitalise on the opportunity that full fibre brings with us. I don't know if Sarah wants to add a couple of, maybe anything else. I think I might have covered it all. I don't want to ask you to add anything I don't need to add.
I just come in, Gilbert, if it's okay, on the health point that Councillor Lynch raised. Yes. I think that's a really important one. And I think we are starting to reach out. We've made some tentative steps to get involved in the local conversations that are happening at the neighbourhood level on Clissold Ward. And we've used that as a sounding board to try and understand what people's needs are for space. So I think that's one strand of the work. And I've recently been meeting with our learning disabilities commissioners, again, to think about how those centres could potentially be used for people with learning disabilities, because I think through COVID, they're looking at adapting their service model for delivery. So I think we're starting to think about that. But as Gilbert said, one of the challenges is, trying to match the financial viability aspects of the building to the needs people have.
Yeah, and perhaps if I could just jump in as well from my perspective. So we are definitely working closely with Sarah and with Gilbert, and we absolutely do want to try and make sure that we coordinate the provision of the connectivity as best we can, so that we can. And I think also so that when community halls reopen, there are new services that we can deliver to residents when that happens, making use of the connectivity that we provide, because ultimately connectivity is nothing if we aren't delivering services through it. And this is very much about what we want to do to sort of improve people's lives locally, as councils have intimated. I think the only other point I wanted to make was that you mentioned Wi-Fi passwords. We don't even require passwords for our Wi-Fi for all. So it'll be really, really straightforward for everybody to be able to access the connectivity, which I think which sounds flippant, but is actually quite an important point, because if it's difficult to access IT, people don't access it. And we know that that's particularly the case where people have been digitally excluded in the past. So it will be a really, really easy to use system. People will just need to press the button once, and then they will be able to connect for 3 months, in the same way that everybody does when they use our Hackney buildings elsewhere in our libraries. So it's in effect the same system that's proven. And the other thing I think people also talked about RSLs. I just want to say a little bit about that, because we have done quite a lot of work trying to work with RSLs to encourage them to sign up with the same full fibre providers on similar terms, so that they deliver similar benefits for their tenants. In fact, the Chief Executive wrote to all the Chief Executives of the RSLs just over a year ago, encouraging them to talk to us, and we have done that for those RSLs who've come forward. Typically, I think it's the smaller RSLs who are most interested. The larger ones tend to be national and or already have arrangements in place. But interestingly, particularly some of the RSLs that we work with anyway, for example, because they're known to adult social care services and things like that, are the ones who are particularly keen to sign up to this, which is obviously great for us because that means that they're delivering connectivity, which will help us because these are places where we have people with learning disabilities or mental health problems who are residents. And that's obviously a double win for us where that's the case. So that's a real priority for us too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody else want to come in?
Can I come, Sharon?
Yes, Councillor Ozen.
Yeah. Hi, Anna. Thank you for presentation. If I think we talked about this before, and if council will maintain both the security and the centralized management of the new wireless infrastructure, will there be any financial cost to council to deliver this service, and or what's the benefit for council providing this service? My second final question is, if other companies, other networks, if they provide better services in the future, also better financial opportunities, so are we going to be able to work with other companies as well? Thank you.
I'm going to take Councillor Mahan, and then perhaps you could answer both questions. Councillor Mahan, you had your hand raised?
I did, Chair. Thank you. Yeah. Just a follow-on from your sort of comment around other RSLs. Some RSLs have engaged, but maybe some of the larger ones haven't. And I don't know about you, Chair, but it'd be interesting to learn maybe which ones haven't engaged. And certainly I've got in my ward a lot of my residents live on very large estates managed by major RSLs, and it would be really interesting to know if they have or haven't responded, and maybe we could be a second prong in prodding them, because I think it would be a great benefit to sort of all Hackney residents to sort of to benefit from the hard work that you guys have done. My main question was just I'm really encouraged to see there was a mention of apprenticeships and sort of training has been included in the discussion with the providers around sort of their activities rolling out these services. And I just wondered if you could maybe give us a little bit more information about that, and perhaps tell us how those opportunities are going to be advertised, and how young people are going to be sort of, well, young and all people in Hackney are going to be signposted to those, because it strikes me as a really sort of exciting career opportunity for people at this time. Thank you.
Sure. So responding to Councillor Osden's questions first. This question was about how are we going to ensure that these solutions are secure, and how will they be maintained, etc. So the joy of what we're doing is that all we're doing by providing Wi-Fi is providing access to the internet. So by providing access to the internet, that does, and the only security that we will have on the system in that respect is to prevent people accessing sites which are illegal. Beyond that, people can basically surf the internet in the same way that they would if they were surfing the internet in their own home. They're not at that point able, for example, to access council services or anything like that, although they would be able to do that in the normal way, in the same way they would from their own home. So it's a very straightforward way of delivering Wi-Fi to people in a way that doesn't endanger anybody, really. So we were doing it that way. And on the question of what happens if there are other suppliers in the future who also want to come on board, that's something that we can easily accommodate. So this is not an exclusive scheme. Anybody who meets the criteria within reason can sign up to the scheme. At the moment, there are realistically only 3 providers in London who we think are able to deliver full fibre in the way that we envisage it should be delivered. But if in the future there are more of those, then they are very welcome to get involved as well, because I think that what that would deliver is greater choice for housing tenants, and that has to be a good thing. In terms of RSLs and who's engaged and who hasn't, I can't quote off the top of my head who those are, but I would absolutely want to take up the councillor's offer to work with him and other members, for that matter, to nudge them wherever we can. I think it's probably something that we'll now want to focus upon, not immediately, but probably in a few months' time once we've launched the scheme in Hackney, because we need to focus on that now for a little while, because we've obviously got limited resources. But it's certainly something I think we would seek to come back to, particularly once we've got some data in and we understand what the take-up is, and possibly we'll be able to get some really good stories from residents about how that's helped them to in terms of their lives. And I think at that point, that's a really good opportunity to go to talk to RSLs. So when we've talked to RSLs so far in the context of things like the housing with care schemes, we haven't talked tech to them. We've talked to them about all the things that people in those schemes have been able to do because they've got connectivity. It's very much about the stories about how they've been able to meet up and keep in contact with their families and friends in a way that they couldn't do previously, and how that's helped them and how that's improved their mental health and so on and so forth. And I think we would want to take a similar approach with RSLs when we come to talk to them about why connectivity is important. So to talk about outcomes, not about the tech, essentially, and anything that members could do to help with that would be great. And in terms of the employment and skills plans, I think I'm going to have to go away and talk to Andrew Monk and come back subsequently with some more detail on that, because Andrew Monk and his team are leading on that aspect of this, simply because they are the people in Hackney who know most about employment and skills, and therefore they're the best people to engage with these sorts of suppliers on those questions. But I'm sure that Andrew would be delighted to talk about it, as would people in his team, and I'm very happy to go away and get more information about that and share that with anybody who's interested.
Yeah, I've got a question. I just wonder, I'll ask it. I do wonder whether Councillor Mackenzie wants to say anything on this before. I'll answer my question, then I'll ask Councillor Mackenzie to come in if he wishes. I just wondered, on the pricing, those prices look quite good. Have we got control of the pricing, or can they put the prices up without speaking to us? I mean, I think I heard recently that Virgin have put their prices up substantially. I might be wrong. I don't want to slander Virgin, but have we got control of the pricing? And if it does go up, have we got any agreements about how much it goes up by?
So just to be clear on the pricing, these are arrangements which are between the suppliers and individual households, and right. they are free to set their own pricing. Where we have discount vouchers, and we have control over the degree to which we can apply discounts where we're applying those. But I think what we're expecting is that this is a more competitive market now, and that what we're seeing is that these full fibre providers are seeing a benefit in being able to undercut what the sorts of pricing that BT and Virgin Media and each other for that matter are offering. So actually very recently, just last week, Hyperoptic turned around with a very, very interesting offer. They are talking about a best value offer of £15 a month for which they would be looking to sort of offer to anybody in Hackney or anybody in London actually who wants to take up that offer. So that is still a high level of connectivity and better than Virgin and BT offer. So I think at the moment, at least, I'm relatively reassured, because the direction on pricing seems to be downward, not upwards. And that's not something we can control. But our hope is that by having competition in the market and making sure that there's as many of these providers as possible who can provide these services, that will ensure that pricing doesn't go through the roof.
Could I come in?
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Patrick, thanks for your question. It's a good question to ask. The road to where we are at the moment hasn't just fallen into our lap. There has been, over the course of the last year, some really hard negotiations with and actually kind of principle being set out to anybody wishing to engage with this agreement. I wish I could say that we could regulate the market and actually kind of like legislate that actually the prices are going to be a Hackney rate. In fact, that was the very first article I made. But unfortunately, I think that was beyond our grasp. There isn't any local authority or any power that be can actually dictate what the market rate should be. But we are very mindful that we want to secure the best possible deal for Hackney residents, which obviously our residents can actually take a choice, take an informed choice whether or not they think the people we've given this wayleaf agreement to actually meet their needs and everything. And hopefully the actual direction of travel is downwards, because what we're doing in Hackney is being noticed by the big players, and they're starting to worry. They're starting to worry about market share. So these types of deals are a good indication of being able to kind of ratchet the market down. And in addition to kind of work we're doing at the moment, we'll be taking this argument to the government in terms of kind of like regulating the internet service provider industry, and actually saying that actually the price tariff rate across the country needs to be generally affordable, because having access to the internet is an essential service. It's a requirement for any person who wants to be able to enjoy the full kind of like services available to us in this country. So it is something on a political level we are pursuing in terms of actually getting better regulation of the internet service provider industry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackenzie. I'm going to move on because time's moving on. We need to finish this meeting by 10 o'clock at the latest, and it's now 9:30. We do have a very important item to still discuss, which is resident engagement. So I know, so we've got yourself, Councillor Mackenzie, we've got David Padfield, Cllr Potter, who's the interim head of resident participation and TMOs and communities, and Gilbert Stowe, who's very familiar to all of us, who's brought this paper to us beforehand, the head of tenancy and leasehold. And I've also, although they've already been on the call, made sure that Steve Webster and Helder DaCosta, as the co-chairs of the resident liaison group, are actually on this meeting, and I will ask them to speak. I don't know if you want to introduce it briefly, Councillor Mackenzie, or whether we want to go straight into officers.
I think because we've got so many officers present, I think it'd be beneficial if we went straight into the presentation.
Thank you. David, are you director, or Gilbert introducing this item?
Actually, we're going to ask Shara to do it, Chair.
Oh, okay.
He's done all the hard work, so I think it should only be fair.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, good. Okay, well, I'm going to skip through the report and highlight some key issues I think that are in there. And I think the initial intention when we put this together was to talk about the restructure, the work we're doing on strategy development. But we've also used it as an opportunity to really highlight some of the work that we've been doing during the pandemic. And I think that's quite important, because I know previous reports to the scrutiny have been very focused on the need to widen participation, increase engagement in some of our participation funds, and I think we have, despite the pandemic, actually made some progress on those areas this year. So I'm going to pick up some of those as we go along. I think in terms of the lockdown, I think, it's pretty obvious that some of the things that we normally do, like, we usually have estate fun days, we have trips to the seaside, we have trips to the pantomime, all those things that are part and parcel of the resident participation offer, we've had to put to one side. But that doesn't mean we've been twiddling our thumbs. And I think one of the first things I'd highlight is, in terms of our lockdown activities, is the work that we did on the Let's Talk project. I think within 11 days of the lockdown on the 23rd of March, the resident participation team put the Let's Talk project into place. And it was very much a response to their understanding of our tenants and leaseholders, and the fact that they knew that a lot of people were feeling anxious, feeling isolated, were worried about, the sort of financial difficulties that were going to come down on them. And, it was very much a team-led initiative, and I think all credit to the team, actually, in terms of coming up with this. And we got a referral route set up very quickly from housing officers into the team. And I think when we started it, we had no idea what the take-up would be and how many people would want to have a chat with us and have practical issues or personal issues they wanted to discuss. And I think, as I've said in the report, we ended up with over 500 people actually contacting the team. And in some cases, we had multiple calls with those people because they had complex issues, related to anxiety, depression, family tensions, family issues. And that was really, it was really important that they had an opportunity to talk. And so I think that scheme was useful. I think it helped us develop the subsequent Can We Help scheme. We gave a lot of feedback to the strategy and policy function about that service, what people needed, the sort of problems they were presenting to us. And I think that has actually helped shape that service. And it was very much a two-way street, because I think our resident participation staff also benefited from training development. They did the Make Every Contact Count training, they got training around domestic violence, mental health. And I think that all increases the capability and capacity of the team. So I think it has been useful. I think it's also really underlined the vulnerability of some of our tenants and leaseholders. And I think that in turn is important in terms of shaping further strategy development. So that's one big area of work. Another area that we funded this year, and it's not something we do every year, we did fund a children and young people's programme over the summer. We commissioned 5 providers directly to work on our estates. So it's very much about hyperlocal provision. And again, that was important. We coordinated with Young Hackney, so we weren't falling over each other in terms of targeting and reaching the same children and young people. And again, we managed to engage 350 children in those programs over the summer, and I think it did provide important respite, not only for the children but for the parents. So that was a very positive initiative. And again, I think, as we move forward, the work we've done with Young Hackney around that and the tie-ins with the recommendations coming out of the Young Futures Commission are all, really important. Something which I know the committee has flagged in the past around widening engagement has been the Residents' Estate Improvement Fund. I think you would previously have known this as the Resident-Led Improvement Budget. And this year we worked with Resident Liaison Group to change its name. I think we were conscious that if we wanted to market it and promote it more effectively, we had to make it clear that it was an estate-based fund and it was very much focused on our housing estates. So we changed its name to the Resident Estate Improvement Fund. And in the report, I've detailed the much wider programme of engagement and consultation we had around that fund this year. And again, we worked with housing management, building maintenance, communications and engagement colleagues to really promote that programme borough-wide. I mean, in terms of responses, we got 805 responses. And most of those came in digitally, which is quite interesting. And we did try and do with the walkabouts as well on estates. So we retained that element. It was a bit unfortunate in that the rule of 6 kicked in just as we started that programme, but it did enable people to have some opportunities for walk-arounds on estates and also to give ideas digitally. And I've included in the appendix to the report some ward-based analysis from that, which you might find interesting. I think there's still work to do on that. 805 responses represents 2.6% of our households, and I think we know that there's quite differential response rates across different areas. So I think this was very much a first step, but I think it was a very positive first step, and I think next year we'll be able to actually coordinate, much wider publicity about the walkabouts, and if we run them after the digital engagement, I think we'll get more turnout at the walkabouts, and I think that'll be really positive. So I think that's been a step forward in terms of encouraging participation and involvement in that budget. We've also done some targeted work. I mean, I think we're very conscious that on some of our wards where we've not got large-scale estates like Cazenove, we don't always have the participation engagement structures in place in the same way we do where we've got large estates. And we've done some targeted work this year on Cazenove, where we've actually hosted and promoted Zoom meetings with residents of particular blocks in the state. And that's been quite good because we've actually reached out and engaged people who we've never been in any contact with before. And, we're trying to get them to form Tenants and Residents Association and take that step further. But I think for some of them, it's not quite where they want to go yet, but it has been an opportunity for them to think about how they want to work with us in the future. Community
wind up.
Yeah. So, I mean, just moving on then to this, I mean, the other issue that we need to pick up on is the strategy development, the restructure. Obviously, we had to put a lot of that work on hold due to the pandemic and due to corporate decisions about halting restructures. But we have now completed the restructure of the resident participation team. We will have a new structure in place by the 1st of June. And I think we're going to have much more role clarity in that team about support to the involved structure, and actually focusing on project development, community development as well. So we will see a shift in emphasis where we'll be doing involved structure and much more project development, because we do need to actually get expenditure on things like the Community Development Fund up. We need to make sure it's targeted and benefiting our residents. So, we will be rising to that challenge through the restructure. We've got a youth engagement and role in there as well, which ties in very much with taking forward the priorities in the Young Futures Commission work. So I think that's a big step forward. And I think finally, and then last but certainly not least, we're taking forward work on the resident engagement strategy. This is very much a model that's been developed in partnership with the Resident Liaison Group. It is a model of co-production, and we're trying to work from the ground up in terms of how we develop that. And I think, what I would end on is the strategy development process is actually going to be more important than the final document, because it's all about building those connections and building those relationships. And I think through the strategy development process itself, we'll be hearing a lot more views and getting a lot more feedback from our residents. And I'll finish there.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Would Steve Webber or Elder DeCosta like to come in from the Resident Liaison Group?
Yeah, Helder's had to leave.
Okay.
Had to leave the meeting, but
could you just do 2 minutes, Steve, please?
Yeah, just on the resident engagement. First of all, the Let's Talk project, the feedback I've had from residents on my estate of use, it's been very positive. That was very welcomed project for residents who were vulnerable and isolated during the pandemic, and hopefully that will develop and expand as years go on, and we don't just lose it when when we come out of the pandemic. In terms of the resident engagement structure, as Shara has said, that is a piece of work that that the resident members of the resident engagement, the resident liaison group, and Shara and other officers have been working on to put together a framework to actually engage with a wider range of residents in the borough to get their views on how how the council should communicate with residents, how we can work together, how we can develop projects together. And I think from Helder and myself, one of the key things we put forward is that we want the engagement structure to actually recognise the contributions that active residents, involved residents and TRAs and the panels and RLG and supported resident groups, contributions that they make, and that they are primary groups to actually have discussions with. And then we want to go out and speak to a wider range of residents, young people from different ethnic groups with disabilities, etc. Yeah, so we get a really broad range of views, and then we hopefully can put something together, you know, that'll last a bit longer, and we can actually have a lot of involvement and input from residents across the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member want to come in? I've got a question. A lot of things seem to have happened this year that as members we were told could never happen. Like wider involvement in the resident engagement, this resident state budget. For many years, the walkabouts have happened in the middle of the day to suit officers, weekdays, and we've always been told that they have to happen in the middle of the day because that's the only time officers are available, despite the fact that perhaps the majority of residents are at work at that time and couldn't attend. I've been on state walkabouts where I've been lucky. There's been one resident engaged on this because other people have been at work or not available. I do think we need to think about more ways of engaging residents at a time that suits residents. Now, obviously, we've heard about digital inclusion, and it's great that you've done some work online. I think you need to continue that. But I do also think if we're going to engage residents, we need to engage them on their terms. And if it means that council officers have to work different hours, perhaps contracts need to be changed so that officers can work at weekends or evenings when residents are around, rather than sort of in the middle of the working day. I looked at your title and you're head of TMOs. I live on a TMO estate. I know other members here do as well. I just wonder what inclusion TMOs have had in this. I know TMOs are responsible for lots of their own stuff, but I do think, but they're also council tenants as well. And I do think TMOs ought to be included to some extent in your engagement. And I just wonder what plans you've got for next year. We talk about, you know, going back to the pantomimes and the fun days and that, but residents really need real engagement. I was reading your report and it talked about how you were going to do resident engagement because of Black Lives Matter and the government policy the government's brought out. Surely, you know, we should have been doing these things. You know, we shouldn't have to wait for the government to tell us to engage with our residents or Black Lives Matter. You know, to think that we've suddenly decided to engage with our BAME residents because of Black Lives Matter really shocked me. I mean, I don't know the percentages, but lots of our residents, council tenants are BAME and BAME backgrounds, and we really need to engage with all residents, but we shouldn't only be able to say that we're engaging with those particular residents because Black Lives Matter. Surely Black Lives Matter all the while, and they are our residents, and they need to be engaged with on an equal basis.
Okay.
So I've got
me to come back on those 4 points. Councillor. So I think in terms of the TMOs as a starter, TMOs, as you rightly say, are responsible for their own resident engagement strategies, but I think we've recognised the need to work in partnership with TMOs. We've got a very good TMO clienting team who sit within my service. We have regular TMO forum meetings, and I have actually been and talked about resident engagement strategy at the TMO forum with the chairs and the managers, and I think we do see them as really important partners and stakeholders in this approach, and also we want to build good relationships with them and learn from each other, because they'll be doing things which are different, and I think we need to share more around good practice. So I think with the TMOs we are making quite a lot of progress. On the timing of the walkabouts on estates for the resident estate improvement fund, what we did this year, we actually liaised with tenants and residents associations, and they decided amongst themselves what was the best time for them, and we did quite a few walkabouts in the early evening. It was we was, because of the pandemic, we were pushing into sort of potentially walking around in the dark, but we did actually alter the times and try and flex it around what residents were telling us they wanted, and I think we can certainly build on that next year. We haven't considered weekends, but that's certainly something we could think about and see if that would work for certain groups. So those are possibilities. In terms of drivers for the resident engagement strategy, I think in the report, I think we've had plans to develop a resident engagement strategy for a very long time. It's a gap in our framework, and I think we were just highlighting in the report that the new social housing white paper, which sort of has evolved from Grenfell and the issues about residents not being heard, they may have been spoken to, but they weren't listened to, and I think that is something that we're very mindful of, because the social housing white paper puts the tenant voice at the heart of everything housing services should do, and I think we're just flagging up that we are going to have to make sure and be even better at what we do around resident engagement. And again, with Black Lives Matter, I think that's part and parcel of the whole issue around diversity, inclusive approaches, and I think, as Steve rightly says, we want to make the resident engagement strategy process as wide as possible, so we hear from as many different people and different groups as possible about how they want to be involved. So,
thank you. I've got Councillor Lynch, and then I'm going to wind up. Councillor Lynch, you had your hand up earlier. You don't want.
No, it's fine. It was just, I was just actually going to make the comment about how the Wick Estate, I was very pleased to see that they've engaged so much. I think you've sort of answered the questions already. So thank you, Sarah. I'm very proud of Compton as well. So I have to put that out there.
Okay. Thank you very much to everybody that come. It's a very interesting presentation, and I'm sure it's something we're going to have back in the future, because resident engagement is something that's important to us. I just wonder whether you want to have final word, Councillor Mackenzie, before we take the minutes. Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
From you.
Yeah, just wanted to say in the context of where we are in the resident participation strategy, unfortunately has been slightly truncated by events outside of our control. We are very aware that actually as a social landlord, we have to put residents' voices at the centre of our thinking in terms of actually kind of evolving the services which we roll out to residents. No way do we say that we're in a perfect place. There's a lot of improvements we need to make, but I do think in terms of the way we're currently working with the residents' movement, we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackenzie. I think we are working and moving in the right direction. So it's good to have a report back at another time. Okay, thank you. Can we agree the minutes of the previous meetings?
Yep.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you. Item 9 is the Living in Hackney Scrutiny work programme. Well, this is the last meeting of this municipal year. We have our first meeting of the next municipal year already planned, and we're going to have an update from the police and MOPAT and the Independent Complaints Police Commissioner on their plans. It's been about 6 months since we've had them, and there's lots of plans that are meant to be put in place. So we're going to have them back for a further discussion about trust and confidence in the police, which we know is something that's a concern to a lot of our residents. Obviously, apart from that, the work programme for next year hasn't been considered. So if any members have any ideas about what they think should be in the work programme for next year, if they want to email Tracy and myself, that would be very useful. I'd like to thank all members for attending this year and being so constructive in their comments, and officers who have attended and been really helpful and presented good and clear reports about what the council's doing. And I'd just like to thank everybody once again. I'd like to thank support officers in Tracy Anderson, Mario, who make sure that we keep Mario, sorry, I can't pronounce your surname. Who keeps us online and make sure that we can have these meetings, and maybe sometime in the future we might actually see each other in person back at the town hall, which would be a nice thing to do. Yeah. Not that we don't like seeing each other like this, but it'd be a positive sign that if we see each other in person, it means that the virus is hopefully partially beaten, which would be great, and we can return to some sort of normality. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, yeah.